Chapter 1750. Unlike other progenitor dragons, Galakron had relatively high intelligence and strength. His body was also hundreds of times larger than ordinary progenitor dragons. Although his big mouth could swallow a progenitor dragon in one bite, he still fed on fish and other land creatures. The other progenitor dragons were only afraid of his size and strength, but they were fine. However, some dead but still mobile progenitor dragons began to appear in the world. Their bodies were still rotting and they had no consciousness, only endless hunger and the desire to attack. It was Galakron who killed and devoured a large number of progenitor dragons. After eating for a period of time, Galakron would vomit out all the progenitor dragons that he had eaten. Those progenitor dragons began to move after Galakron sucked away all their life aura and vomited them out, becoming new undead dragons. They attacked and even ate other progenitor dragons. The fearful slaughter naturally attracted resistance. Under the leadership of Xianxia, a large female progenitor dragon who had a crazy desire for victory but lacked strength, a large number of progenitor dragons gathered. She first isolated the infected progenitor dragons and created a collapse to kill them. Then she led the remaining progenitor dragons to fight against Galakron. Unfortunately, Xianxia's uprising failed, and even she was torn into two by Galakron. Nesario and the other 4 progenitor dragons who would become dragon aspects in the future worked together to cover the retreat of the other progenitor dragons. After the battle, the progenitor dragons were greatly injured, and the number of surviving progenitor dragons were few. In despair, the Titan Guardian, Tyr, who was later in charge of guarding Oder, appeared. He chose and assisted Malygos and the other 5 progenitor dragons. After Malygos felt Tyr's powerful strength, he formed an alliance with Alexstrasza, Nozdormu, Isra and Nesario to challenge Galakron. However, in the battle the 5 progenitor dragons could not cause fatal damage to the larger Galakron. As Tyr's battle plan only used himself as the core of the battle and did not guide the 5 progenitor dragons to cooperate reasonably closely, Tyr's arm was bitten off by Galakron during the battle. His warhammer was also knocked away, and the divine weapon at Tyr's waist was swallowed by Galakron. Malygos and Alexstrasza rescued Tyr and quickly retreated to a frozen wilderness in the north, later known as Northren's Dragonbone Wilderness. Soon after, the final battle between the 5 ancestor dragons and Galakron started in the sky above No Scent. In order to save Malygos, Neltharion went to face the undead dragon legion alone. Alexstrasza, her sister Isra, and Nozdormu attracted Galakron's attention. Malygos successfully threw the boulder into Galakron's throat. Galakron had difficulty breathing due to the blockage in his windpipe, and in the end he choked to death. This ancient history was forever imprinted in the hearts of the 5 dragon aspects. Even when Nesario died and his soul was torn apart, he did not forget it. This was because Galakron was the root of the progenitor dragon. It represented the strongest of the progenitor dragons and also represented the beginning of all mutations. After the 5 progenitor Daoist defeated Galakron, who was thousands of times larger than them, Tyr introduced them to the Titans who visited Azeroth. The Titans also gave the 5 progenitor dragons the responsibility and power of the dragon aspects. This allowed them to transform from the most primitive beast-like dragons into dragons with extraordinary powers. It also shaped and evolved into the 5 major dragon clans of today. In a sense, Galakron was the original Dragon King. It was precisely because of the overthrow of his reign of death and terror that the glory of Nesario and the other dragons came. It was unknown why Galakron suddenly fell into madness. However, Nesario was very clear about what Galakron became after devouring too many progenitor dragons. It was a giant beast that was like a mountain. Countless eyes and dragon claws appeared on its gigantic limbs and body. Even in the eyes of today's aesthetics, it was still a monster among monsters. Nesario did not care how N'Zoth dug out Galakron's huge skeleton from the north of the Red Jade Dragon Sanctuary in the Dragonbone Wilderness. He was just instinctively afraid that he would go down the same path as Galakron. However, N'Zoth's words shattered all his hesitation. "Stupid Nesario. What do you have to lose now? You are worthless if you can't serve me." Worthless meant that there was no need for him to exist. Nesario absolutely believed that an existence as cunning and insidious as N'Zoth would definitely destroy him completely, or force him into submission, just like how he had used the whispers of the ancient gods to destroy his mental defenses back then. I agree. As long as I can take revenge on my brothers and sisters who deserve to die 10,000 times. And that despicable and shameless Duke Marcus. It doesn't matter what I become to vent the endless anger in my heart. Nesario's soul roared, and his withered dragon head trembled continuously. Yes, that's right. And Zoth sneered. This sinister laughter reverberated in the underground palace of the deep rock continent. In the void, countless illusory octopus-like tentacles stretched out and hooked Nesario's dragon head. They extracted something from the withered dragon head. Then, like a millstone, the hundreds and thousands of savings grinded Galakrond's spine into powder round by round. When the deathly pale dragon's pine bone powder was stirred by Enzo's tentacles into a small mountain of paste, all of the paste was poured into a corpse that had been placed in the deepest pit of the temple for a long time. It was the corpse of Nesario's son, Nefarian. Nefarian's dragon head was like a chicken head that had been chopped off by a kitchen knife, and was directly taken away by the tentacles. A few tentacles placed Nesario's dragon head on Nefarian's neck. Suddenly, a black paste gushed out of Nefarian's neck and turned into thousands of small tentacles that respectfully welcomed Nesario's dragon head onto his neck. Under the pull of that pitch-black power, Yangqi's body trembled. The dragon head and body that originally belonged to different individuals were forcibly fused together. However, because of the difference in their original sizes, Nesario looked very strange at the moment, just like the cartoon dolls that Dumuk had seen before he transmigrated. It was quite ridiculous. The next moment a mutation occurred. The dragon body that was originally smaller suddenly made a crisp sound of bones exploding. Kalala. At first it was only the sound of frying beans, but towards the end, every explosion sounded like the beating of a drum. The Twilight believers around the temple were all so shocked that they covered their ears in pain. At a speed visible to the naked eye, the dragon body that once belonged to Nefarian began to swell like a balloon. Chapter 1751. Gifts from the ancient gods had never been anything good. The ancient gods, who were monsters themselves, had no sense of beauty to speak of. In the ancient war, the elegant and beautiful high elves in the eyes of mortals had all turned into hateful Nagas. As soon as Nesario's soul was injected into this new body, he felt a terrifying pain that penetrated the deepest part of his soul. Roar! The hard dragon skin on the claws that already belonged to him burst open. The scales on his skin were almost shattered. After the scales were removed, new biological tissues were being revived under Enzatha's evil divine spells in the hole full of rotten flesh. However, there was no way to expect anything to happen. What regenerated in the hole were not dragon scales, but a large number of tiny eyeballs, small dragon claws, dragon arms, and even wings. Ow! Nesario could feel his vision splitting into countless parts. These were not the compound eyes of a fly, but the vision of the eyes that burst out from every corner of his body. They were all haphazardly pieced together. That feeling made him go completely crazy. He tried to open his limbs and vent his pain with destruction, but he was shocked to find that the limbs that once belonged to Nefarian were all locked by huge, unknown metal shackles. Countless illusory tentacles came crashing down, making each of his limbs unable to move. At this time, dozens of huge chainsaws driven by the Twilight believers arrived. These chainsaws, powered by unknown divine spells, were cruelly cutting his new limbs so that his body could maintain the appearance of a giant dragon. This time it was not only Enzoth. In a trance, there seemed to be the remnant will of other ancient gods joining in the sneer. Perhaps it was Enzoth, Yogg-Saron, or Yashaji. Their bodies might have completely perished, but as a former true god, the remnants of their will still reverberated in every corner of the Azeroth world. These ancient gods began to gather their power, and all of it was injected into Nesario's new body. And Zoth laughed. Is it pain? Sadness? Resentment? Anger? Then let it all out. It didn't matter. This was also a form of strength. We are currently conducting a small experiment that will allow you to possess the destructive power of a true god. The more negative emotions you have, the more damage you'll cause to planet Azeroth. Is that so? That's wonderful. Nesario roared crazily. Due to some mysterious method, his furious roars started to spread across the entire deep rock continent. The violent tremors began. It was no longer a problem of the Earth elemental plane alone. The intense tremor crossed the planar barrier and directly affected planet Azeroth. In the southern sea of the endless ocean, it was originally a sunny day with a gentle sea breeze. In the next second, a huge tremor transmitted from the deep sea easily set off a monstrous wave. Rumble. At first, not many people noticed this scene. It wasn't until the huge green wave that approached the shore that the guards at the lighthouse noticed this scene. Oh my God! Is the world going to be destroyed? The 30-meter-tall goblin statue that once stood outside Booty Bay was as small as a baby in front of this doomsday wave. At this moment, Nesario's voice actually crossed the Earth elemental plane and the spatial barrier of Azeroth, echoing endlessly in the entire sky. Those were the words he roared a few minutes ago, and now they began to hover over the entire world in the form of echoes. Pain. Suffering. My hatred burns in the abyss. The world trembles because of my torment. If it were any other existence who uttered such curses, they would definitely be regarded as a lunatic. However, he was none other than that. He was the Wings of Death, Nesario, the former Earth Guardian Dragon and now the Dragon of Death. Along with his voice, suddenly, a huge flaming crack tore the entire barren lands apart. The blazing lava was like a 100-story-tall lava dragon charging on the ground. The earth was torn apart from the bottom to the top, and every crack was accompanied by a burst of magma. There was nothing that could stop the destruction of the wrath of the heavens and earth. Mountains of all sizes were destroyed by the fire dragon's rampage. A huge orc town that was a few kilometers in the way of the fire dragon was destroyed like a bulldozer. Nesario's apocalyptic illusory sound continued. The lamentable kingdom collapses under my wrath. A gale comparable to a level 12 storm suddenly blew. The goblin airship that was preparing to land in the sky above Agrima involuntarily spun and crashed on the spot. The wood that exploded and the fuel that flowed out caused a second disaster. At that moment, every tribe in the entire Agrima felt as if the world had turned upside down. Everyone lost their footing and fell to the ground. Amidst the chaos and screams of the soldiers. As long as they could see the scenery outside, they could only watch in despair as a gray tornado came crashing down on them. That scene looked very much like a foolish captain on a fishing boat, ordering his small dinghy to rush into the tsunami and face the storm. Under the dual effects of the earthquake and the storm, huge wooden houses with more than 2 stories collapsed and shattered under the double elemental disaster. Countless Agrima soldiers and civilians were swept under. When the last standing building in their field of vision was disassembled into parts by the combined forces of the earthquake and the storm, the gates of hell were almost right in front of them. It was a scene of chaos everywhere. The incomparably brave orcs left the ruins of the buildings like ants escaping from a flood. Every beam let out a terrible squeaking sound. This scene was like the end of the world. They abandoned the city that they had been proud of for the past 11 years and scattered in all directions. Standing on the high ground of the Valley of Wisdom, Thrall stood rooted to the ground and watched the scene. When a huge wooden stake flew towards him, he even forgot to dodge. It was Varrock who helped him knock the wooden stake away. In the ancient shrine of the Deep Rock continent, the Twilight believers began to use their own methods to modify Nesario's new dragon body under En-Zotha's command. Bang! 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 One by one, the iron stakes with dragon heads like siege owls hit Nesario's body. This was so that pieces of incomparably hard and mysterious metal could be inlaid into his constantly growing dragon body. The suppression of his growth was also solidifying his body. Chapter 1752. Ow. Ow. It was a terrifying pain that was enough to make any living creature collapse. If it was possible, Nesario could continue to maintain his spiritual body and no longer have a nervous system. However, En-Zoth deliberately showed his bad taste. He used the ancient god's biological cells to activate Galakrin's cells that had been dead for 25,000 years, and then let Nesario, the Dragon of Death, still feel the explosive pain in his body. Every scale had the pain and itch of new flesh and bones being regenerated. The new flesh and blood that were born were constantly blocked, burnt, and destroyed by the hateful metal armor. Nesario could no longer bear the terrifying torture of being reincarnated repeatedly in the 18 levels of hell. Having regained control of his body, he used his enlarged claws to press down hard, destroying a large number of workshops and buildings around him. As if in response to his pain, almost every volcano in the land of Azeroth, no matter if they were active or dead, all of them began to pour out hot magma. The volcanoes erupted, shooting out flames that were enough to destroy everything in the world. In the northeasternmost area of the Kalimdor continent, the Black Sea coast, located in the sea north of Oberdeen, there had obviously been some slight changes in history. The elven hippogriffs that had long been scattered around the entire sea area, as well as the Alliance soldiers on the flying destroyers, all saw that with a violent vibration, a huge volcanic island broke through the shackles of the sea and stood upright on the surface of the sea. It was a newborn volcano. It was constantly venting its fiery anger towards the sky. Immediately, in the thick smoke and ashes of the volcano, a huge black dragon broke through the barrier of the rock layer, broke through the layer of space between the earth elemental plane and the real world of Azeroth, rushed out of the ground and rushed into the sky amidst the volcanic ash. He easily rolled up to a height of 1,000 meters. The entire atmosphere was burning up, and a blazing aura swept across the clear sky for thousands of miles in an instant. Every scout and observer stared at the enormous creature in the distance in astonishment. Not to mention the rookies who were about 20 years old, even the seniors who had witnessed the great battle between the 5 dragon aspects in the south of Rotterdam City more than 20 years ago still felt a sense of powerlessness and fear when they saw the lava WM that was even larger and more exaggerated than the one they had seen in the past. Damn it! How could this beast be so huge back then? That doesn't seem right. Why do I feel like Nesario is more like Nosdormu now? Almost as soon as Nesario, the Wing of Death, appeared, Duque, Sylvanas, Ilun and Alexstrasza, who had transcended the mortal world and stepped into the divine realm, sensed it immediately. Some were shocked, some were frowning, but Duque was embarrassed on the spot. It took him a long time to react and he cursed in a low voice, "Coward. In the future you can change your name to Coward Wing or Nazari Coward." Mortals were destined not to know about matters of the god realm. Countless scouts had risked their lives to send back reports that they had found the figure of a lava dragon suspected to be Nesario north of Oberdeen. It was a hellfire dragon in the form of a dragon. Its entire body was flowing with blazing lava, and terrifying fire elemental runes were branded in every corner of its stony body. He flapped his heavy stone wings and without even circling in the air he flew straight towards the south. Warning! Warning! A fire dragon suspected to be the Wing of Death is attacking the Oberdeen area of the Black Sea coast at high speed. In the intermittent magic communication network, the scout risked his life to send back an urgent report. He quickly received a reply, "Don't worry. Oberdeen has completed the evacuation." On the mountains to the east of Oberdeen, there were 5 specially set up observation stations. There were volunteer mages who had already left their wills there, and they were the only witnesses on the scene. They witnessed how the pier, which had maintained the frequent connection between the Night Elves Teldrassil and the Kalimdor continent for the past 10,000 years, was destroyed. Nesario was like a comet falling from space into the atmosphere, his whole body bathed in fire. He merely flapped his wings and flew over Oberdeen, but the huge sonic boom as he flew over the sea had already killed all the fish and shrimps in the sea near the shore of Oberdeen. The terrifying airflow generated by the high-speed flight was thousands of degrees hot. This terrifying tsunami-like heat wave easily lifted all the plank roads on Oberdeen Pier. The raging flames that followed immediately set off all the buildings on the pier. Not only the Night Elven-style wooden pier shading roof, but also the upgraded stone pier buildings were all engulfed in a sea of fire. The flames were so hot that the seawater around the pier instantly boiled. The fish that had just been killed by the shock turned white and became ripe meat, churning with the boiling sea. The Wing of Death crossed the entire Kalimdor continent from the location of Winterspring at a breakneck speed, then changed to the southeast, rushing all the way. It seemed that his speed was still increasing. He crossed the wetlands in the southern part of the Eastern Kingdom continent, changed to the south and headed straight for Stormwind City. In the sky, his soul language filled with curses continued to spread. His deep whisper could be heard in several nearby areas. In the end, all of Azeroth will be destroyed. As if to confirm the words of the Wing of Death, when he swept past the boulder dam between Loch Moden and the wetlands at high speed. The extremely exaggerated air pressure directly crushed the dam. Loch Moden's original name meant lake in the Dwarven language, while Moden meant mountain range. Thus, in the Dwarven language, Loch Moden was a lake in a mountain range just like its appearance. Loch Moden had a large lake and dam that could look down on all of Azeroth. Coupled with the fact that it was not polluted by the various heavens' wrath or demonic forces, it was once a very good place to live. The rich wildlife and fishing in the lake provided the daily necessities of the dwarves. The mountain range was filled with all kinds of precious minerals, and the Titan ruins that the dwarves liked to explore could really be said to be a paradise designed by the creator for the dwarves. However, the Wing of Death just passed by and destroyed the Boulder Dam. When they heard this real-time news, the eyes of the three Bronzebeard brothers turned red. Even though the people in the wetlands had already been evacuated, the building that the dwarves were so proud of, the Boulder Dam, had collapsed. This meant that more than 90% of the lake water would flow into the wetlands from the collapsed site, and the entire ecological environment would be severely affected. At this time, the Wing of Death finally shouted his last curse. In the shadow of my wings, all things will turn to ashes. Chapter 1753. Everything will turn to ashes. How arrogant. When she determined that Deathwing did not fly to the Sin Dorii kingdom, Sylvanas had already returned to Stormwind City through a special portal. Here she saw her sister and two nieces. Hey, Deathwing seems to be coming to Stormwind City. I know you're strong, but how can you let your child? Queen Sylvanas could not persuade him anymore. Because Duque was still in disguise, not even wearing a mage robe. He was just playing with the children. I just watched you act cool quietly, never interrupting you. From the perspective of the elves, the song was simply out of tune and affecting the city, but it made the two elf Lolas giggle. Obviously, Duque saw something that Queen Sylvanas could not. Queen Sylvanas had never been a fool. It was just that after Silvermoon City was destroyed, she fell into extremes. Now that Arthas was destroyed, her revenge was avenged, and she was pregnant with a child. Queen Sylvanas's intelligence and wisdom were all displayed. Although Duque might have secretly hoped that Queen Sylvanas would become stupid for 3 years after pregnancy, in fact Queen Sylvanas was very smart. Seeing that Duque did not move, she actually took off her ranger costume and changed into a set of home clothes, translucent pajamas. Hey, Duque, tell me, why don't you come over and accompany me? A long white leg stretched over from the chaise longue next to her and touched the inside of Duque's thigh. Duque actually wanted to say, "Don't flirt, you'll get F***ket if you do." At this slightly weird point in time, Duque really could not do anything to Queen Sylvanas. Stop it. Didn't you already send Countess Katrana to face the enemy? Queen Sylvanas burst out laughing. At this moment Queen Sylvanas felt that Duque was bad to the core. Yes, bad to the core. There were many demigods on the Alliance's side. But there had never been a demigod like Xianxia, who had such a powerful talent but fought so cowardly. It could be said that Xianxia was invincible against enemies below the demigod level. Against enemies of the same level he could not defeat anyone. In particular, she was very afraid of her father, Deathwing. Perhaps the fear of Nesario had been deeply engraved in her when she was still in her mother's womb. Her mother had been forcefully pushed by Darkwing. Not only had she used force, but she had also almost lost her life because of the splashing acid. When Nesario was still alive, she and her brother were just useful pawns for Nesario. Now Duque had actually asked Xianxia to face her father, who had been strengthened by Enzos to an unknown extent. Duque was a little too evil. On the other hand, Sylvanas also firmly believed that the Deathwing that was charging over at high speed should not be in any danger. After all, in Stormwind City's King's Valley, after crossing the long stone bridge, there was a statue facing the gate, but it was a statue of Duke Marcus. If Nesario really stepped on Stormwind City's King's Valley with his claws, wouldn't all the statues of heroes, including Duque's statue, collapse and be destroyed? How could Duke do such a thing where he would be slapped in the face? Moreover, Duque was the kind of person who would indiscriminately gather a large force to kill his opponent as long as he had the opportunity. Even if he could not kill him, just like during the third battle at the Dark Portal, if he could not kill the fool, he could at least chop off one of his hands and break his waist. That was not bad either. Duque did not even have the intention to greet his subordinates. The only one who was kept in the dark was Xianxia. This was really, at this moment, Xianxia, who was still in the dark, was extremely conflicted on the lighthouse outside Storm Harbor, which was located in the north of Storm City. She was originally smart and cunning, but when Duque asked her to be the vanguard to fight against her father, she was in a mess. Duque's words still echoed in her ears. You can be a noob, but you can't be a coward. Because you are too timid, you can't exert your original combat power. That's the original sin. I have many women around me. Which one of them cannot fight, carry, warm the bed and be independent? Onyxia, you cannot even believe in yourself, but you must at least believe in the me who believes in you. For some reason, Onyxia felt very warm in her heart when she heard the last tongue twister. When she thought back to what Duque had shown her back then when she was in her zombie dragon form, she felt a chill run down her spine. She could not imagine that she, who loved beauty so much, would turn into such a horrifying and ugly appearance in a certain timeline. That was completely unacceptable. Feeling the roar of the atmosphere in the distance and carefully savoring the changes in the elements from far to near, Onyxia's face turned ashen. She suddenly felt a wave of coldness hit her face as though she was afraid. She could not help but wrap her arms around her chest and hug her body. At this moment, feeling the tight-fitting lace victory shirt that Duque had given her, for some reason she suddenly regained her courage. Onyxia, you can do it. You have the god of fate, Duke Marcus, behind you. If you want to obtain your position in the new Divine Realm Palace, you must win this battle. Onyxia encouraged herself in an obsessive manner. It felt like her courage had multiplied. Onyxia jumped down from the 30-meter-tall lighthouse. She let the strong wind blow her long black hair, feeling the strong wind. Suddenly she seemed to have returned to the era when she dominated the world alone. The ultimate transformation spell was instantly activated. She stretched out her neck and let out a long roar. Black wings appeared on her back, and her limbs turned into indestructible claws, covered with shiny black scales. The beautiful red robe with black trim turned into a stream of light and returned to the space storage bag, revealing her dragonized body. A thick tail grew out from her buttocks. When she neared the surface of the sea, she had completely changed back to her dragon form. Under the gaze of the Stormwind Navy's officers and soldiers, this giant dragon that had completed the gorgeous change in identity from an evil dragon that brought disaster to a country's guardian dragon was rapidly growing bigger. She quickly returned to her original size. In terms of size, her body was only less than 1/10 the size of the black dragon that attacked from the northern coast at high speed. However, this time, Onyxia bravely met her father, whom she had been extremely afraid of for a long time after she became sensible, the Wing of Death, Nethario. Nethario. This is the Stormwind City that my master Duke Marcus swore to protect. This is not a place for you to behave atrociously. Go back to where you came from. Otherwise, my master and I will let you taste true eternal destruction this time. Although her choice of words sounded a little hollow, Onyxia really roared with vigor. She was completely different from the timid daughter in Nethario's memory. At this moment, Nethario was a little confused. Chapter 1754. In terms of size, the current Nethario was nearly 10 times the size of Onyxia. The gigantic body of the dragon, which was wrapped in thick layers of rock, looked like a mountain with wings soaring in the sky. It was as if this was the dragon version of a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Nethario flapped his huge wings that were as wide as Storm Harbor and hovered in the air. He opened his huge dragon mouth that could almost swallow his daughter in one bite, revealing his crisscross dragon teeth that looked like sharp rocks. He let out a loud laugh that could be heard all the way to Storm Harbor. "Ha! My daughter, what are you talking about? If you're trying to make me laugh, then congratulations, you've succeeded." Nethario's face was full of ridicule. "Now I'll give you one last chance. Tell me your true identity. Please pay attention to what you say. I will decide whether to tear you into pieces, and then turn you into a zombie dragon to continue serving my cause of destruction." This was an unmistakable threat. He was clearly trying to force Onyxia to betray Duke and join Neltharion's side again. As for whether she would be used as cannon fodder or something else in the future, there was no way of knowing. In front of the mountain-like body of the Wings of Death, Onyxia really looked very, very small. If it was in the past, Onyxia would have been terrified no matter what. "I can't win. I definitely can't win. Going against a terrifying existence like father is courting death. Don't fight him. Once we start fighting, I might be torn to pieces in just one round." The voice that emerged from Onyxia's heart at this moment was the best portrayal of her mood. There were many voices in her heart. Surprisingly, she did not feel upset at all. It was as if the voices that also came from her heart could not affect the core thoughts that dominated her. At most, they were like buzzing flies, which was a little annoying. Although the timidity in her heart could not be eradicated, what flashed through her mind at this moment were images of Duque's victories. Flattening the king of the molten core sea. Taking care of her brother Nefarian in Blackwing's nest. killing the ancient god Si Thun in the temple of Encourage. In the outland, Draenor beat up Illidan. The Sunwell was stuck in Kil'jaeden. Odor beat up Yogg-Saron. He destroyed the Lich King Arthas at the Ice Crown Fortress. Onyxia did not know how far Duque's undefeated legend could go. But it seemed that this was far from Duque's limit. It was enough for him to stand with the victors. As for his father, he, a loser who had been killed by Duque once, still had the nerve to bark? She did not know when it started, but in Onyxia's eyes her father, who was incomparably huge, seemed to have become small. His threatening words were more like the whimpers of a dog, not worth mentioning. Onyxia's dragon face revealed a very human-like expression of mockery. Who am I? Of course I am Onyxia, the most loyal mount of the mighty demigod of the Weave, Duke Marcus. As long as Master is willing, you can ride me anytime, anywhere, and however you want. I'm also willing to kill all those who stand in my way for Master, including you, my so-called father Nesario. What a shock. What a shock. Nesario had never thought that his daughter, whom he had not seen for a long time, would lose her moral integrity to this extent. Where was his impression of the yes-man daughter who was only fit to be his thug? Why did he feel that this female black dragon in front of him, who looked exactly the same, was so unfamiliar? Nesario had yet to react. The black dragon princess, who had lost her moral integrity, continued shamelessly, "Poor Nesario, haven't you had enough of being a toy of the ancient gods? Since my master can kill you once, he can kill you countless times until you are completely erased from the river of time. Your so-called backer N'Zoth is nothing more than this. As long as he dares to show his face, he will be besieged and killed by Master, just like his companions Si Thun and Yogg-Saron." Onyxia was so proud of herself, like a fox exploiting a tiger's might. Nesario could not believe his ears, and it took him a full 3 seconds to react. "Enough. You're a disgrace to the black dragons. Scum of the dragons. You've lost all the face of the W's face? I'm the dragon of justice, who turned over a new leaf and successfully joined the ranks of the dragon aspects. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Even Alexstrasza has tacitly agreed that I'm Master Duque's mount. I'm so disappointed. It seems that you've been completely brainwashed by that despicable human." "Brainwashed? You've obviously been brainwashed by N'Zoth's murmurs of the ancient gods." The black dragon did not lose to her father when it came to trash talking. He had been reduced from a proud dragon aspect to a slave of an ancient god. Although he knew deep down that it was indeed the case, Nesario had never been willing to admit it. It was bad enough that his daughter was extroverted, but she was still frantically digging up old wounds. This was simply intolerable. "Ow, the ancient gods are the true rulers of this world. Since these shameless lowly creatures have stolen this world, I will completely purify this world on behalf of the ancient gods, and then rebuild a great world that belongs to the elements." In a fanatical atmosphere that he had created, Nesario's IQ seemed to have plummeted, and he suddenly shouted slogans. Crazy. Capricious. This was also one of the important reasons why Onyxia was afraid of her father in the first place. But at this moment she felt that her so-called terrifying father was nothing more than this. That was because her experience had changed her view. Different perspectives meant different views. In the face of Nesario, who had begun to charge at her, Onyxia spat out a fireball. This fireball seemed to be no different from the ones she usually used. Nesario did not care. When he realized that he could not use his wings to fan away the fireball that was coming straight at him, he raised a huge claw and slapped it. Bang! With a loud bang, the fireball hit the tip of the claw and exploded. The scorching airflow rippled the air around the claw. Due to the rapid change in the temperature of the atmosphere, the field of vision there looked a little blurry and distorted. Something unexpected happened. The tip of the dragon claw, which was wrapped in earth elements and collided with the fireball, exploded on the spot. Onyxia clearly saw that a section of the fingertip was blown off by the explosion. Under the impact of the explosion, it flew dozens of meters away, then fell in an arc towards the sea. Wait a minute. What the hell is this? At this moment, Onyxia suddenly remembered the first sentence that Duque said when he ordered her to fight. "I'll leave that coward wing to you." Coward. Chapter 1755. Onyxia was not the only one who was confused. Even Neltharion himself looked flustered. After a while he finally stopped in the midst of a series of screams. Impossible. Not. Onyxia was not a fool. On the contrary, she was a highly intelligent character the moment she appeared. Unfortunately, when Duque subdued her, he seemed to have damaged her morale too much, causing her to turn into a coward like Onyxia. Without any hope, the conspiracies that she was once proud of were all banned. Having given up on herself, Onyxia gave up her courage and stopped thinking at the same time. She regarded herself as a simple mount, which made her look like she was under the monkey-style reduction spell. At this moment, Onyxia knew at a glance that the giant dragon in front of her was not her father. At least this body was not. She suddenly realized that if the one who had attacked was really Nesario, would Duque have allowed her to bicker with her father for so long? He would definitely have brought a large team to attack. Onyxia narrowed her eyes. Poor Nesario, you don't have the fear and dignity of the wings of death anymore. You're just a toy of Enzoth. You didn't even realize that your consciousness was attached to a stone dragon made of evil magic. No. My body was only damaged by that bastard Maligos. Nesario defended himself. But how can you say such shameful words when your remains were insulted by your own brother? It seems that you're no different from me, right? The black dragon princess, who had made up her mind, immediately spat out her venomous tongue happily. Oh no. You're already dead. My late father. You can no longer feel the beauty of life. Although I look a little shameful, when Master Duque becomes a true god in the future, I can also become the most powerful oracle. When Onyxia said this, Duque, who was in Stormwind City, had already face-palmed. He could not bear to look anymore. Perhaps this was the price. Sometimes it was difficult to have the best of both worlds. He had subdued the Black Dragon Princess, only to find that she had lost all her integrity. Sure enough, when it came to conquering, the most important thing was the process of conquering, not the result. Right. Onyxia, get rid of this stone doll. Duque ordered the Black Dragon Princess through the soul link. Sir. My master. Onyxia seemed to have been injected with adrenaline and rushed over while howling. He opened his mouth and spat out fireballs. This wasn't a fireball from the era of the molten core. Although Duque had confirmed through the magic net that the dragon made of rock and fire elements was a fake as soon as he popped out of Nesario, Duque did not dare to take it lightly. If things went wrong, Onyxia's journey of gathering her courage would become a journey of sending food to her death. Hence, as a reward for her long loyalty, Duque gave her a small portion of the control over the fire element. This portion was not a portion in the ordinary sense but a portion of divinity. The portion of the control over the fire elemental realm that Duque had obtained from Ragnaro's clone in the molten core was actually not much. But in order to give the loyal black dragon some confidence and hope, Duque reluctantly gave her a third of it. That was because, in Duque's eyes, there was already a bigger cake placed in front of him. The cataclysm had already begun, and the 4 major elemental realms were extremely close to Azeroth. At this time, Duque could already kill his way to the Land of Fire where the fire elemental realm was and fight it out with Ragnaros. As long as he completely defeated the Fire Demon King this time, the fire elemental realm would only have his Duke Marcus voice in the future. Another fireball was spat out. Onyxia's fireball still looked like an egg, but its actual power had increased by more than 10 times. Compared to this giant version of Neltharion, her fireball was clearly just a small flame, but when it exploded on her body, it was really painful. Boom! The exaggerated explosion actually blasted a huge hole the size of a villa in Neltharion's lower abdomen. Under that thick rock layer there was no flesh, no bones, only dry and tasteless rocks. No matter how weak Onyxia was, she was still a demigod dragon. It was not difficult to beat up a fake that only had a good appearance. Onyxia, who disliked using flames to bombard too slowly, completely got rid of the fear that her father had brought to her this time. She boldly rushed forward, swung her long and thick black dragon tail that was even more powerful than a battering ram and smashed it hard. This fake was really big. The stone dragon that was purely driven by elements and part of the soul fragment could be said to be terrible in terms of agility. After receiving a series of heavy blows, the fake Nesario finally could not hold on any longer, and his movements clearly slowed down for a moment. The Black Dragon Princess, who was even more petite, seized the opportunity to do a 3.5 somersault with a degree of difficulty of 4.0 and hit the former's chest with a spiral flick of her tail. The terrifying blow caused the stone chest to cave in deeply. Terrifying cracks spread in all directions layer by layer, and the dragon-shaped shell burst into pieces. The remnant soul of Nesario, which was attached to the stone dragon body, let out a shrill soul wail. He tried hard to control the unfamiliar body in an attempt to launch a counterattack. Unfortunately, Xianxia, who was full of confidence, was even more at ease in the battle. In Duque's opinion, her attack was as ridiculous as using a plastic serrated knife to cut a 1,000-year-old tree. In fact, her destruction was quite efficient. The stone dragon body parts, large and small, were crushed under her attack. Like a bulldozer, she quickly shoveled away a huge sand sculpture called Nesario piece by piece. Soon, when the chest of the fake was blown up, a scarlet crystal was revealed. Duque, who was observing from Stormwind City, could not help but exclaim, F***CK. I've never seen such a big heart of the mountains. This mysterious gem, which theoretically could only be born in huge mountains, had quite amazing earth elemental magic. Unexpectedly, Enzoth was so awesome that he found such a big one and used it as the core of Nesario's substitute. Although Duque wanted to tell Xianxia not to touch this thing, it was too late. The black dragon, who was immersed in the fact that she had defeated her father, smashed the small house-sized heart of the mountains with her tail. Boom! With a loud sound, the huge stone dragon body collapsed and shattered, and every dragon-shaped part on its body began to fall apart on its own. It was as if there was a meteor shower in the sky and huge rocks fell into the sea 10 kilometers away from Stormport. Chapter 1756. Dong, dong, dong. The sound of the boulder falling into the sea was like the drumbeat of victory. Xianxia's heart leaped with joy. Haha! I finally dared to make a move against father. Sure enough, even that fellow Nesario is afraid of Duque. The black dragon's words naturally had two meanings. First, she had finally surpassed herself and dared to use her dragon claws on someone she once thought to be absolutely terrifying and someone she would never dare to disobey. Second, even someone as terrifying as the Wings of Death still had to walk around Duque when they saw him. This was a simple and straightforward reason. If Nesario was really that powerful, why didn't he just kill his way to Duque's doorstep and start a war with him? From the beginning to the end, Duque had released his elemental fluctuations and clearly told all his enemies, I, Duke Marcus, am waiting for you in Stormwind City. Perhaps it could be said that Duque was arrogant, but it could also be said that Duque was sinister. After all, whoever dared to come to Stormwind City would be swarmed by the demigod powerhouses who had been waiting for a long time through the portal and devoured the intruder. However, Nesario was terrified. This was real. He didn't even dare to personally issue a challenge, so he sent an unpresentable stone substitute. If this wasn't cowardice, what was? Wahaha! Nesario is terrified. Wings of cowardice. You don't even have the courage to face my master, so don't pretend to be the best in the world. Let me tell you, if my master can destroy you once, he can destroy you a second time. Xianxia laughed wildly as she looked at the sea where Nesario's substitute had fallen. Although the object of her ridicule was her father, the messy affairs of the Black Dragon clan and the terrible family relationship that was prone to killing each other were just like that. Duke Marcus, just you wait. Once I destroy Azeroth, I'll see what use a demigod like you will have. Nesario's roar came from the void. At this moment, Duque's virtual image also appeared and landed on the special seat above Xianxia's neck. Even though she knew that Duque's main body wasn't here, the Black Dragon Princess still cooperated and allowed Duque to ride her. She flapped her long dragon wings and hovered in the air. Oh. Since you're dead, Nesario, you should wait quietly for your soul to dissipate. Why did you come here to court death? But if you have any tricks up your sleeves, just come at me. I'll take them on. Duque raised his head at a standard 45-degree angle, exposing his nostrils in the direction of Nesario's spiritual sense. That's right. He just scoffed at it. Nesario didn't even have the guts to show his face. Similarly, Duque didn't have to come in person. He just had to give a magical 3D image. Hee hee. Let's see if you can still be so confident after the world you're so proud of is completely destroyed. After a sneer, Nesario's divine sense disappeared into the void. Phew. Duque's projection exhaled, then looked down at Xianxia. Come back first. Yes, master. Her shiny black dragon tail was wagging like a cute puppy. It was obvious that she was in a good mood. In Stormwind City, Duque quietly watched the changes on planet Azeroth through the mage's eyes that the magic net had set up all over the world. The cataclysm had finally begun. Most of the changes were as Duque remembered. The biggest problem on the Alliance's side was still the collapse of the Boulder Dam, which directly changed the landscape of the wetlands and Loch Moden. Loch Moden was the source of food for the Bronzebeard dwarves. They couldn't expect the icy Dan Molar to produce enough food for hundreds of thousands of Bronzebeard dwarves. It was foreseeable that the dwarves would cooperate more closely with the Alliance. The Iron Furnace Fort could only buy food with the money from selling machinery and firearms if it became a purely industrial country. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Unfortunately, before the cataclysm happened, Duque couldn't say, "I have a premonition that the Boulder Dam will collapse, so you guys do new work in the wetlands in advance." After all, what if the fortifications in the wetlands collapsed as well? In one of the visual images, a huge pit appeared in the middle of Stranglethorn Vale, which turned into a large whirlpool. The technical term for it was a pit fissure. However, when Duque asked Kurtiras to develop the new capital in Booty Bay, he had already taken the cataclysm into account. Not only did he avoid this pit located in the northeast of the Gurubashi Arena, but he also used 100,000 murlocs to build a giant breakwater in the shallow sea area west of Booty Bay. Once upon a time, the captains always complained that they needed to go around the huge breakwater to enter this port, which had been renamed from Booty Bay to Proudmoore City. Now none of them said a word. In fact, Nesario, who had been instigated by Enzoth, could not have done such terrifying damage alone. However, he had brought the 4 major elemental realms closer to Azeroth, which was the fatal part. Even if the will of the planet Azeroth recovered, it would not be able to stop the turbulence caused by the elemental disorder. Moreover, in order to kill Thun back then, the planet had already suffered serious injuries. To recover from injuries of this level, the time needed by the will of the planet was often measured in units of hundreds of years. Even though it had suffered injuries of this level, the will of the planet only sent a vague question. If translated into human language, it would only be one sentence. What happened? Enzoth activated the Wings of Death, Nesario, and brought the 4 major elemental realms closer to the main plane. However, I think we can solve it ourselves. This was how Duque replied to the will of the planet. "I'll leave it to you." That was what Azeroth said. Duque knew that this was a form of trust and a promise. As long as he dealt with Nesario this time and did things properly, the reward in the future would definitely be beyond his expectations. On this side, because they had taken the most thorough precautions, the losses of the Alliance could be said to be very light. In terms of damage, it was not even as serious as the disaster that Arthas led by the cataclysm that swept across the Lordaeron continent 15 years ago. After all, the evacuation work had been done in advance and not many people had died. At present, it was estimated that the entire Alliance had only lost a few hundred people. In addition, most of the Alliance used reinforced concrete to build houses, and the houses that collapsed were all old wooden houses which happened to be able to sell a wave of cement. The Iron Stove Fort was not a disaster area. The Stormwind Industrial Zone in the Elven Forest had avoided the possibility of a catastrophe when it was first established. It could be said that the industrial foundation of the Alliance was almost undamaged. As long as they spent some time, the Alliance could take the opportunity to get rid of the old and welcome the new. They could replace the old houses and backward handicrafts, and turn the entire Alliance into a blessing in disguise and usher in a new life. Phew. In the study, Duque let out a breath of turbid air. We finally made it through. Just as Duque sighed, he found that Onyxia had returned. "Master, it seems that you haven't tamed a dragon for a long time, right?" The black dragon's face was unusually flushed. Chapter 1757. Dragons that had been adjusted by the Titans could be said to be the perfect existence at the top of the food chain. Not only did they have high intelligence, but they could also control the elements and even transcend the mortal world. As a price, their fertility was greatly reduced. Frankly speaking, the ancestor dragon could really eat and give birth. Compared to their long lifespan, the dragon's estrus seemed very short. So when Duque saw Onyxia like this, his heart skipped a beat and he blurted out, "You're, in estrus?" The black dragon princess, who had long taken on the appearance of Countess Katrana, blushed even more, but she became hesitant. "No, it's just that today I finally broke through my inner demons and dared to fight my father. I feel very happy. I want to repay Master. Although I have no interest in taming dragons, if Master is happy I will be happy too." Onyxia was always passive when it came to taming dragons because of her pride. Since she took the initiative to bring it up, Duque, who had nothing to do and was waiting to see the tribe suffer, readily followed her good advice. Seeing her lift the red lace skirt with black edges and reveal the battle suit inside, Duque was dumbfounded. "You're wearing this to fight against your father? I feel that the thing you gave me will give me courage." "Alright, F***ck as long as you like it." Now that he was familiar with the route, Duque directly activated Dragon Cave Exploration Mode. This was a rare and hardy dragon taming ceremony. At this moment the space around Duque suddenly distorted. At first Duque did not care. He had set up a restriction a long time ago. Unless it was a specific target, if anyone dared to open a portal within 100 meters of him, the system elf would definitely pop up a warning and automatically activate magic to seal off the surrounding space. Since the alarm was not triggered at this time, the person coming must be on the safe whitelist. There were not many people on Duque's whitelist who could tear through space and kill their way here. Duque was having a good time and subconsciously thought that it was Jaina. When Duque saw that Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza will arrive in 30 seconds, Duque was shocked. At this moment even Onyxia noticed the spatial fluctuations in the room. "Damn, it's Alexstrasza!" Duque exclaimed. Normally the Red Dragon Queen would never teleport so close to Duque. He must have something urgent. Alright, it just had to be stuck at the crucial point of Duque taming the dragon. Duque's life was at stake. Dumuk was on the verge of breaking down. His own wife, Aurelia, didn't even care about him, but he ran into Alexstrasza. This was like a scene where adultery was caught. No matter how fast he moved, there were still many traces that he couldn't clean up in time. The two of them couldn't help but silently say, "Don't ever get discovered," 100 times. Space was finally broken. The queen's knee-high red boots were the first to step out. Before the humanoid Red Dragon Queen arrived, she could already hear her complaints. "Duque, what the hell are you doing? First you tacitly allowed me to come in, then suddenly locked it? I've been very busy all these years. I wouldn't have come to you unless there was something important. What's that smell?" The Red Dragon Queen tilted her head. The two curved dragon horns on her head tilted to one side, looking a little silly. "No, nothing." Duque had already opened the window for ventilation. The Red Dragon Queen sniffed hard. She wasn't a shut-in dragon who had never been to human society. After just 3 seconds she knew the truth of the matter. "Yo, I can't believe you." Duque actually used the current Earth Guardian dragon as a mating partner. Duque spat out a mouthful of blood. Onyxia was so embarrassed that she lowered her head, almost burying her face in between her two dragon peaks. The Red Dragon Queen 38 took small steps and circled around Duque and Onyxia, making comments like, "GG" from time to time. "This lady who is suspected to be the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, please conduct yourself with dignity." Duque's face was dark, his forehead full of black lines. "I've always found it strange. How could the sinister and cunning Onyxia be completely tamed by you? So there's this kind of operation. So she got addicted to the game and really thought of herself as a woman. In the end she developed a relationship with you that transcends species?" The female detective Formosa propped her chin up and made an irresponsible deduction. "You're filthy. Do you believe that I won't bring demigods of the weave to attack the dragon's slumber shrine?" Duque threatened. "No." The thick-skinned Queen 38 was resolute. "What the hell, can we even talk properly?" Duque was also furious. He might as well go all the way. He sat down and pulled the dragoness into his arms. His hands moved all over her, making a dragon roar. "Don't you want to see? I'll let you see enough." Duque was so shameless that Alexstrasza cowered. Alright. The dragon slumber shrine doesn't care about the private lives of giant dragons. There's a guy from the blue dragon side who fell in love with a well, and there's also a guy who's infatuated with a soul doctor. It's not unusual for a female dragon to fall in love with a demigod. As she said this, Onyxia, who was in Duque's arms, visibly relaxed. "Let's get down to business." Duque quickly changed the topic. At this moment the slightly off-track Dragon Queen suddenly realized something and exclaimed, "Ah, I almost forgot about business. I just felt the soul fluctuations of the ancestor dragon's father, Galakran, in the soul of Nesario's substitute." Galakran. This name was very unfamiliar to Duque. However, Every player who had been in the Dragonbone Waste would be puzzled by the exaggerated dragon bones in the Dragonbone Waste. When Alexstrasza finished explaining the story to Duque, Duque muttered to himself. Needless to say, Enzatha's train of thought was really ingenious. He could even come up with such an awesome idea. Speaking of which, Galakrin had been dead for 25,000 years, but he could still extract vitality factors. This made Duque speechless. Now Duque was really a little worried. If the reborn Nesario also had the ability to devour living dragons and strengthen himself, that would not be good. After all, he could choke that guy to death by throwing a big stone last time. This time Nesario was already dead. Not to mention choking him, even if he used a stone to replace his heart, he would still be alive and kicking. Damn it, Duque. This was a little tricky. Duque, I don't know why, but I have an ominous feeling this time. Back then, the four of us could have worked together to deal with Nesario. Now that he has been resurrected by Enzoth, he must be even more terrifying. And he has Galakrin's ability. If you don't help me, I really don't have any confidence. Alexstrasza showed a rare timid look. Chapter 1758. Onyxia had been too ashamed to face her senior, Alexstrasza. Now it was the Red Dragon Queen who had lowered her head. Duque could understand what she was thinking. The 5 dragon aspects were like brothers and sisters. Not only were they brothers and sisters from the progenitor dragons, but they were also companions who had been blessed by the Titans to become higher-level dragons. Killing Neltharion once was already an unbearable torment. Now not only did he have to suffer a second time, he also had to face the nightmare of Galakrin. If it was Duke Ku, he would probably go crazy from the endless entanglement of ill-fated karma. More importantly, Duque knew the fate of the original dragon aspects. At the time of the cataclysm, it was Nozdormu's turn to die. What was even more cruel was that not only did Duque know, but Nozdormu himself also knew. It was as if he had an incurable disease, yet he still had to remain silent and walk step by step to the end, waiting for his destruction. It was definitely not a good feeling. However, the Bronze Dragon King had not said a word from start to finish. After sighing, Duque smiled. Who do you think I am? If I don't help you, who will? Suddenly, even Alexstrasza's eyes became misty. Yes. When did it start? It seemed that Duque had saved her in order to fight against the tribe. She had always tried her best to help Duque. Alexstrasza might have been able to maintain a sense of superiority in the beginning. As Duque's strength rose like a rocket, Duque, who had seemed insignificant in the past, became the new guardian and savior of Azeroth. When the dragon aspects fell, it was Duque who came to the rescue. When Otter's guardian died, it was Duque who appeared and held the fort. Since the beginning of the Dark Portal, Duque had appeared almost every time there was a crisis to save the world. Whether she was willing to admit it or not, Duque and his forces had become an important part of Azeroth's survival. Even though she knew that Duque was doing this to help himself, Alexstrasza still felt a surge of warmth when she heard such a firm and unhesitant promise. Thank you. You're welcome. Duque nodded lightly. As if her brain had gone haywire, Alexstrasza suddenly asked, You really don't need to thank me? Like having sex with you once like Onyxia? Pfft, Dumuk spurted out. Onyxia just wanted to find a hole to hide in. Forget it. Duque felt a headache coming on. Things like taming dragon were only interesting when it came to specific targets. If it was a challenge of this nature, then forget it. To avoid any awkwardness in the future. After all, whether or not Alexstrasza understood human emotions was another question. The queen put her hands on her waist and looked left and right. Actually, I feel that my elf form is more in line with human aesthetics. What, you don't like it? Well, that's not the problem. Duque's balls continued to ache faintly. After talking for a long time, Duque finally understood that Alexstrasza was lacking a brain. If he really ket her, he reckoned that Duque would not feel any sense of accomplishment. Speaking of which, when do you think we should make a move on Nesario? Duque pondered for a moment. Now Enzoth and Nesario are thinking of a way to completely connect the world of Azeroth with the 4 elemental realms. This will certainly cause unrest in the main Azeroth plane, but it's also an opportunity to strengthen the planet. In my opinion, it's more appropriate to wait for the overlapping spatial structure to stabilize before launching a fierce attack. I see. How long do we have to wait? According to the current progress of the spatial fusion, about 3 months should be enough. At the latest, no more than half a year. 3 months was a very delicate period of time. As a long-term plan, it was undoubtedly too short. However, it was more than enough to ferment certain events. History had unknowingly taken a turn. In the original history at this point in time, William had long been driven crazy by the near collapse of the economy. William was an excellent warrior, but he was not a king who understood economics. Therefore, William was very irritable at this time, and the ghost wolf's personality began to gain the upper hand. In this life with Duque, although the economic lifeline of Stormwind was almost entirely in the hands of the Marcus family, as long as Duque and William did not oppose each other, Stormwind's economy could be said to be under a lot of pressure, but it was still quite healthy overall. In particular, Duque had made economic transformation and various disaster relief plans in response to the cataclysm. In addition, from the end of the crusade against the Lich King to the occurrence of the cataclysm, there were a few extra months of buffer time. This caused the entire economic system of the Alliance, including Stormwind, to undergo a slight sharp turn. However, there was still a long way to go before it overturned or even collapsed. Duque was too outstanding. He was so outstanding that even though William did not have a good relationship with Duque, he still unconditionally handed over the country's economy to Duque. This allowed William to focus on training the army of Stormwind. The only thing that William was unhappy about was that his son Anduin Rin was too soft. He was like a wimp and not manly at all. He did not know that his son would become the famous Dirty Shepherd in the future. He would always believe in Brother Spring and resurrect hundreds of Alliance soldiers on the spot. At this moment, this irritable father was extremely troubled. Unfortunately, because Duque had intervened in the Van Cleve incident and settled things with Onyxia, William's queen Tiffany Alien, was still alive in this life. To some extent, she had become little Anduin's protective umbrella. William, who was helpless against his queen, kicked little Anduin to the Bronzebeard brothers, hoping that Magni could teach him to become a great warrior. Duque had vaguely mentioned that he sensed little Anduin had other talents. But William was very stubborn at certain times. My father is a warrior. I am a warrior. Uncle Anduin Lothar is a warrior. Little Anduin must be a warrior too. Since William said so, what else could Duque do? Abduct little Anduin, turn around, and groom him into a dirty shepherd before returning him to William? William would probably fight him to the death. Hence, little Anduin had already been thrown to Magni's side before the cataclysm. Magni was especially surprised by Anduin's arrival. He had not enjoyed the joy of family life for too long. Both of his younger brothers were busy. One was guarding the northern borderline and dealing with the aftermath, and the other was obsessed with archaeology after dealing with the Lich King. His beloved only daughter had long fallen out with him. Magni treated Anduin like his own son. The Dwarf King often called the little prince to his room to eat and chat, and enjoyed the time as a father and son. He especially requested Anduin not to call him His Majesty but Uncle. Chapter 1759. Duque knew it through cheating as a transmigrator, but Magni knew what little Anduin was more suitable to do through pure communication. He didn't agree with William's plan to train Anduin into a warrior because Anduin didn't want to be one at all. In fact, he was more suited to be a priest than a warrior. For this reason, Magni even gave Anduin the Bronzebeard family's holy hammer, Crusher of Fear, which had been passed down for generations in the Bronzebeard family. This hammer of magic damage would shine in the right hands, and Anduin was such a person. In short, Anduin enjoyed the happiest period of his life in the Iron Furnace Castle. Unfortunately, happy times were always short-lived. Now Magni had another important thing to do. Uncle Magni, do you have to go? Little Anduin looked reluctant after knowing Magni's plan. Anduin, you will eventually inherit your father's legacy and become the king of Stormwind. Your life and soul, from the day you were born with the surname Urin, no longer belong to you but to the people of Stormwind. This is the glory of being a king and also the duty of a king. Anduin didn't really understand, but he nodded obediently. Magni solemnly placed his hands on Anduin's shoulders, who could already be considered a youth. Only I can walk my path. I am walking for all the dwarves. This is everyone's hope and also my own choice. Anduin pursed his lips and nodded again. Unlike the original history, this time, Magni chose his own path after knowing most of the situation. Under the guidance of Rock Warden Alcavan, Bulang didn't have to spend much effort to find the designated stone slab in Odor. It was a treasure left behind by the Titans, and recorded on it was the method to communicate with the earth element. It was called Earth Slab. Magni knew the value of this gift from Alchemy, and took it very seriously. After some research, he looked for Duque and expressed his wish to follow Alchemy's guidance to conduct an ancient ritual according to the records on the stone slab, and attempt to communicate with the earth in order to break through to the realm of demigods. I am most worried about the fate of the dwarves, and also worried that if I leave for too long, it will cause political unrest. Also, I'm afraid that the ritual will cause an earthquake and destroy the iron furnace fort, so I want to open the old iron furnace fort. In the end, Duque could not help but reveal a spoiler. No, I tried to further interpret the Titan language on the slate. Although it wasn't 100% according to my estimations, the power of this ritual would be quite mild. The only problem is that, as an earth type, you've probably been a demigod for much longer than Servanas and I. How long was it? Muradin, who had rushed back, asked. According to my estimation, it will probably take several years. It shouldn't be more than 10 years. What Duque said was an estimate, but those who were familiar with Duque all believed that Duque had seen too many things in the long river of history. Perhaps because of the restrictions, Duque could not reveal too much, but everyone understood. Magni made his final decision. Iron Furnace Castle cannot be without a king for a day. So be it, Muradin. You will inherit my throne and then I will perform the ceremony. If I'm lucky enough to succeed, I'll come back and be the guardian of the Iron Furnace Fort. No. The throne is yours, big brother. I only agreed to manage the Iron Furnace Castle as the acting king when you're gone. When you return, the throne will still be returned to you. No, second brother, Big brother, you're taking a gamble for the future of the dwarves. Do you want me to bear the stigma of stealing the throne of heroes? Muradin roared with great agitation. In the end, under Muradin's insistence, Magni finally gave in and agreed to let Muradin be the acting king. It was different from the original history where he had to communicate with the earth to seek answers because of the elemental riots. Now Magni was doing it with a clear goal and had arranged everything in advance. This way, even the elders of the Bronzebeard dwarves could not say anything. There was no so-called succession ceremony. It was just a gathering of the ministers and the handover of government affairs. Muradin Bronzebeard became the acting king, and while Magni's soul slept, he held all the power of the Bronzebeard dwarven king. It's time. 3 days later, under the watchful eyes of Duque, Muradin, Bulang, Kudrin Wildhammer, Rockwatcher Archivon, and a group of dwarven elders as well as the dwarven guards in the secret chamber, Muradin activated the ritual of connecting his soul to the earth. The earthen yellow radiance filled every inch of the magic array that extended from the stone slab. The earth bore all things. The earth nourished all things. The richness of the earth was not something that water, fire, and wind, the 3 more intense elements, could compare to. Under the watchful eyes of hundreds of pairs of eyes, Magni Bronzebeard's body slowly changed. It was a stiffening that spread from the soles of his feet. Archivon used his deep voice to guide Magni. Do not be afraid. The essence of dwarves is the earth spirit. You have just returned to the roots of your race. Slow down your breathing and let yourself become a part of the earth once again. Release your will and slowly search for your self-worth in the earth. When you find your answer in the embrace of Mother Earth, that will be the day you become a demigod. Magni's body had crystallized. In less than 5 minutes, from his feet to his waist, then to his chest, neck, limbs, and finally even his head had turned into diamonds. It looked like Magni had completely lost his breath and had become a diamond man. If they didn't know better, they would probably think that Magni was already dead. This was the case in history, and Muradin and Bulang had no intention of taking the throne, and were even more unwilling to snatch the throne of their not-yet-dead brother under such circumstances. This caused the Bronzebeard dwarves to fall into great chaos. With Duque as a witness and Archivon's guidance, everything became logical. Muradin bowed deeply to Duque. I'll leave the magical protection to you. Duque bowed deeply in return. Leave it to me. After Duque spent an hour to complete a demigod-level magical protection circle, he connected it to the magic net and monitored it at all times. A team of 100 dwarven secret room guards were stationed around the magic circle. In the next few years they would take turns to guard their king's surroundings, until Magni returned after stepping into the divine realm, or to witness Magni's true eternal death. While the dwarves were transitioning their power, a terrible political storm was brewing on the tribe's side. Thrall had lost control of the tribe. Answer me. Great Chief, what exactly caused the tribe to weaken and degenerate? Tens of thousands of orcs gathered in Orgrimmar's Valley of Wisdom, Valley of Power and Valley of Spirit, letting out earth-shattering questions. Chapter 1760. Agrima, who was surrounded by mountains, paced back and forth in the sky above the ruined main city. Through the wooden walls of the Great Chieftain's hall, it went straight into the ears of everyone inside. Great Chieftain, I'll go and disperse those ignorant brats. Varrock was indignant. Not only him but the other guards of the Great Chieftain were the same. Thrall waved his hand and smiled bitterly. What if they don't want to leave? Then beat them up. What if those young people impulsively use weapons? Varrock hesitated. Was he really willing to suppress his own people with blood? On the contrary, young Salyafar was even more irritable. Although he was already a Death Knight, he was still deeply trusted by the Great Chieftain. After the return of the Sun King, Anastrian stepped down as the leader of the Forsaken, and now Dranos Salyafar became the leader of the Forsaken as a Death Knight. Dranos waved his arms vigorously. Those scum, if I wasn't already dead, I'd go to the gate and put up a flag. If they have the ability, come to Makara. They refuse to obey the leadership of the strongest and dare not challenge. What kind of traditional beastmen are they? Thrall didn't say anything. He looked at young Salyafar with infinite regret. If possible, he would have preferred Dranos to be his successor. Unfortunately, this kid died in the hands of Arthas, even if he regained his freedom after becoming a Death Knight. But a tribe dominated by beastmen couldn't have a Forsaken as the Great Chieftain. At least not in the current atmosphere. Wajin spoke. Great Chieftain, I smell a conspiracy. In fact, I would suggest that we immediately send more people and encourage those who are dissatisfied to directly launch Makara. Let the challengers first challenge the various chieftains, and then challenge the Great Chieftain as a chieftain. If you can win a few rounds, the atmosphere of the tribe will be much better. The bitter smile on Thrall's face became even more bitter. What's the point of just stabilizing my rule? If the tragic state of the tribe can't be improved, then it's meaningless for anyone to be the Great Chieftain. Standing in the great hall of the chieftain and looking out through the window, most of Orgrimmar was moaning in the ashes. Even though Thrall had used his power to suppress all the violent fire elementals, more and more scattered fire elementals still managed to invade Orgrimmar during the elemental disaster, bringing even more destruction to Orgrimmar. By the time Varrock and the other Horde bandits had killed all the Twilight Believers, half of Orgrimmar had been destroyed. What made the tribe leaders even more depressed was that the entire territory of the tribe had been hit by the elemental disaster, and even more serious, the cataclysm. The Nushui River, which separated Durotar and the Barren Land, swelled due to tectonic movements and flooded a large area in the central and western part of Durotar. It became the Nushui River Basin, which was divided by crisscrossed pools. A terrifying trail of lava cut through the Barren Lands from the northwest to the southeast. Now that place was called Great Rift Valley. The southwest of the Stoneclaw Mountain area was originally under the control of the tribe. A sudden volcanic eruption completely destroyed an important town there, and more than 5,000 people lost their lives. Now it had been renamed Coal Valley. The Thousand Needles and the Flashing Plains were flooded. At least most of the areas in the Thousand Needles were controlled by the tribe. Those were the simple losses from the disaster. What happened next was the real headache. The desolate land, which was conquered by the traditional orcs who migrated from Golan and Nagrand. The originally barren wilderness was gradually brought under the jurisdiction of the tribe. Even if Gruul didn't listen to orders, it was still under the control of the tribe. The cataclysm changed the landscape there, and a new green basin was born in the center of the desolate land. The unexplainable crustal changes and the transfer of life energy made the barren land there suddenly green. The trees inside grew wildly. This attracted the attention of the Cenarian Circle. The Night Elf Druids of Fandral Staghelm and the Tauren of Thunderbluff both chose to settle there, which undoubtedly increased the territorial conflict. In turn, because Thrall sought to solve the problem through dialogue, this angered Gruul. The demigod behemoth was extremely irritable. He felt that his dignity had been insulted. On the other hand, Thrall's protest against the alliance was met with difficulties. Duque had indeed sent a stern inquiry to Darnassus, asking why Fandral led the army into the territory of the tribe without the approval of the alliance. Fandral was a member of the Cenarian Circle and prided himself on his status. He believed that all forests and green lands should be under the jurisdiction of the Cenarian Circle, especially the new green lands. Thus he flatly refused the alliance's mediation. But could things like identity and race be so easily separated? They were druids, yes, but the problem was that they were night elves first and then druids. Tyron almost went crazy with anger. If you're not a night elf, you don't have to look to the alliance for support. Tyron was also angry. This undoubtedly deepened the existing conflict between the alliance and the tribe. After all, in Northren's northern expedition, the tribe had lost more than 250,000 troops. However, because the tribe had retreated before they attacked the Icecrown Fortress, they didn't get any benefits from the Icecrown Fortress. The radical beastmen led by Gurus felt that the tribe had paid a huge sacrifice for nothing. This was unreasonable and strongly demanded that the Northwind Tundra of Northrend be part of the tribe's territory. Duque didn't express his opinion on this. This time it was Kalego's turn. As the new Dragon King of the Blue Dragons, Kalegos might be a scumbag, but he wasn't careless when it came to the interests of the tribe. He directly announced that the Northwind Tundra had been the hunting ground of the Blue Dragons since ancient times, and that the Warsong Beastman deserved to be slaughtered by Maligo's subordinates. If the tribe intended to occupy the Northwind Tundra, it would be seen as a declaration of war against the Blue Dragons. The five-colored dragons were of the same breath. Now that the Blue Dragons had set things right, Alexstrasza directly came out to support Kalegos. She also announced to the tribe that if the tribe wanted to occupy the Northwind Tundra, the Dragon Slumber Temple would not sit idly by. This time, Gurus was completely deflated. He shamelessly asked Thrall to ask Duque for the Grizzly Hills. In the end, before they could even negotiate with the Alliance, Thrall rejected him. The attack on the Grizzly Hills was basically handled by the main force of Stormwind, led by Varian. Even if it was incorporated as territory, Stormwind would have priority. Chapter 1761. The Horde didn't have the strength to threaten the Alliance, let alone their position. As a great leader, Sal's charisma was unquestionable. He abided by his principles and couldn't bring himself to ask Duque for territory, especially on the Eastern Front where the Horde didn't participate. Being principled was Sal's strength, but it was also Sal's weakness. If he was more ambitious, the Horde might be more aggressive and have a wider territory than it was now. Conversely, Duque wouldn't have allowed the Horde to exist until now. After receiving news of the Horde's internal strife, Jaina immediately went to find Duque through the portal. How will the Alliance deal with it? Theramore is already under martial law. In this life, Jaina didn't have any sympathy for the orcs because Duque deliberately tricked her when she was young. It was even more impossible for her to have an unclear relationship with Sal like in history. If Theramore had been established for her own cause, after she became Queen of Bakur Tiras and moved the focus of Bakur Tiras to Hidden Treasure Bay under Duque's suggestion, Theramore's position changed. Now, Theramore was not only a window of communication between the Alliance and the Horde, but also a bridgehead for the Alliance to invade the Horde's territory when necessary. Apart from retaining the necessary functions of military logistics and a trading port, Theramore was purely a stronghold. Faced with Jaina's question, Duque smiled and shook his head. The Horde's current conflict is just the inevitable result of their expansion being suppressed. In fact, solving the conflict is very simple. As long as there is enough territory to settle the excess orcs who migrate from Nagrand and let them live and develop, then nothing will happen. Jaina immediately understood Duque's position. Her pretty face was full of cold sneers. If the Horde's territory is not enough, the Alliance has the obligation to fight for new territory for them? If it's not enough, do we have to cut our own flesh and feed it to these green-skinned creatures? After all, they were the leaders of the Alliance, not the chiefs of the Horde. How could they do something stupid and give away their own territory just for the survival needs of the Horde radicals and their endless greed for territory? It could be said that 15 years after the Beastmen arrived at the Kalimdor continent, Duque had been secretly restricting the development of the Beastmen, and it had finally paid off. Duque's plan was very big and no one in the tribe noticed. By the time Sal and the others found out, the Alliance had already stopped the development of the tribe. In the Kalimdor continent there were many ownerless lands. Whoever could occupy it first and stabilize it would develop well. Moreover, Duque and Sar both knew that if Azeroth hadn't been threatened by so many evil forces, the Alliance and the Horde would have already started a war. Since there was no way to start a war, the game between the Alliance and the Horde would be reflected in their own development. The tribe's population was small, and their economic foundation was even worse. They were destined to need to develop at a faster pace in order to obtain strength that was close to that of the Alliance. The original history was that the Lordaeron continent was completely destroyed, and the Alliance's strength was greatly reduced. The Horde took the opportunity to catch up. Duque's appearance not only saved the Lordaeron continent, but even revived the 3 destroyed kingdoms of Lordaeron, Alterac and Stromgarde. Coupled with all kinds of black technology and economic policies that transcended the era, the Alliance's economic strength and military strength were far above the Horde's after 10 years. That made Sal even more afraid to start a war. However, the situation had now changed. The influx of more than 2 million orcs from Draenor had indeed greatly increased the population of the Horde, but it had also brought a heavy burden to the people's livelihood. The continuous natural disasters as well as the Calamity Army and other dark forces causing trouble, made the orcs who had escaped the destruction of Draenor feel like they had just escaped the tiger's den and entered the wolf's den. When the cataclysm broke out, the internal contradictions that had been accumulating for a long time were finally fully exposed. Orgrimmar and even the entire Horde were now like a powder keg. With just a little spark, there would be a big explosion that would blow the Horde into pieces. Does Sal dare to lead the Horde to war with the Alliance? Jaina asked. Duque shook his head. It's precisely because Sal is rational and is the orc who knows the Alliance the best in the entire Horde that he doesn't dare. On the contrary, ignorance and recklessness make him fearless. Jaina immediately understood what Duque meant, and the sarcasm on her face intensified. Those orcs whose brains are still stuck in the prehistoric era really think that the Alliance is the sparsely populated Draenei? Traditional orcs were extremely barbaric. If they were unhappy they would fight. If they were unhappy they would fight. Anyway, they would fight for territory every day. How could there be no deaths? If they lost they would admit defeat. If the other party did not let them go they would simply exterminate the Horde. Over thousands of years, countless clans had disappeared in the long river of history, and countless ambitious orcs had become independent from the old clans and created new ones. Back then the orcs had established the old Horde, launched a war against the Draenei and won. In fact, there were several important reasons. First, the absolute value of the population was disproportionate. Before Draenor was destroyed, the Horde had a population of at least tens of millions. And the Draenei were automatically chased by Kil'jaeden's Burning Legion, and had never exceeded 1 million. The Draenei had lost too much technology and only had holy light magic left. This allowed the Horde's population advantage to play a role. In addition, Kil'jaeden had given Ghoul, Dan evil magic and nurtured a large number of warlocks among the orcs, which largely offset the advantage of the holy light. No. The Alliance had popularized modern weapons on Earth with TNT explosives as the core, and there was also the magical black technology of the flying fortress and flying battleship. Not to mention that the Horde had less than 3 million people, unless all the warriors in the Horde were professionals who had stepped into the hero realm. Even if there were 10 times this number, they would not be a match for modern artillery. Was it so easy to produce a hero realm expert? Including the morning level mages at most, whether it was the Horde or the Alliance, they could only reach 4 digits. After hearing Jaina's words, Duque also sneered. If you want to destroy someone you must first make them crazy. The Horde is already a crazy train heading towards hell. No matter what Sal does, it will only delay the speed of their descent into hell. If we don't fundamentally remove the influence of the traditional orcs, the Horde is destined to be destroyed. As Duque concluded this, Sal, who was in Orgrimmar, turned his head and pointed at a stack of documents. Do you see this? Even the Horde's reports for recording important events use the Alliance's paper. Do you really think that the Alliance's lead over us is in a single area? Well, that's an all-round backwardness. Unfortunately, many little bastards think that even if these technologies are really useful, as long as we defeat the Alliance, we can get all the Alliance's technologies. Varric's voice was full of bitterness. Chapter 1762. Ridiculous. Is the technology of the Alliance so easy to steal? The one who spoke was the boss of the Goblin Rustwater conglomerate, the Prince of Trade. Sal never really believed this despicable goblin. Garavex became the king of trade by exploding, selling out his goods, or betraying everyone he knew. When Calero volcano erupted, only Garavex had a refugee ship. He charged every refugee their life savings as a fee. Then he packed up every goblin in the upper class like sausages, ready to sell them as slaves. The monster-like Garavex betrayed all his people for more almond coins. During the Second Dark Portal War, he became the chairman of the Copper Street Joint Venture, a consultant of the Tinkerers Alliance, an important goblin in the Trade Alliance, and the second richest person in the Rustwater conglomerate. He called himself. After a few months of plotting, he killed the former king of trade Marty at a banquet. Through various pretenses and small businesses, he owned most of the former's property in the Trade Alliance, stole the land under his name, and finally became the new king of trade. If the Alliance hadn't ruined all of this despicable guy's businesses and sealed off all his bloody ways to make money in the Alliance, he probably wouldn't have become the Alliance's mortal enemy and turned to the Horde. In fact, although Sal disdained to steal the technology of the Alliance, he never stopped Garavex from sending people to steal technology from the Alliance. Unfortunately, corpses hung from the walls of the Alliance's factories and research institutes from time to time, as well as Garavex's temper every once in a while, proved that the Goblin leader's plans had failed again and again. Duque had set up the magic net in every new technology research and development center and every major factory in the Alliance. Those soul guards who never needed to sleep monitored every corner of every important place in the Alliance through the magic net. Except for no more than 20 gnome craftsmen, including Jurbin, no one in the entire Alliance had a complete set of new technology. The most frightening thing was that the greatest inventor and leader of the Alliance's new technology happened to be Duke Marcus himself. If it was someone else, they might be able to cut off the Alliance's momentum through abduction or even assassination. But this scummy goblin leader would never be able to deal with a real demigod of Azeroth. The Alliance could export a lot of products to the Horde, but they would not export any new technology that was close to the forefront of the Alliance's technology. The gnomes, with their vile personalities, only had the ability to steal and modify. When it came to research and development, the gnomes were far superior to the gnomes. For example, the flying battleships. Until now, the gnomes had yet to create a flying battleship that could fly for 100 hours without any accidents. The Alliance had already begun to develop the third-generation propeller and Titan anti-gravity hybrid flying battleships. Anyone with a brain would feel despair at this gap. However, the group of Nagalan orcs, who only had cold weapons in their minds and were close to primitive people, still had fanatical confidence. They firmly believed that if there was anything that one person couldn't solve, it could definitely be solved with 10,000 people. If they couldn't win, it was only because they didn't have enough determination and not enough people had died. Of course, in theory, once they started a war with the Alliance, as long as they used up the Alliance's ammunition with human lives, they could drag the Alliance into hand-to-hand combat, which the Beastmen were best at. But was this possible? Coincidentally, at this critical juncture, the traditional orcs, who were the mainstream of the tribe, issued the strongest voice of resistance so far. If they didn't do anything, this sound would soon become the only melody in the tribe. Sal felt a sense of sorrow that suffocated him. At this moment, a messenger came, followed by a group of soldiers, each soldier holding a thick stack of report envelopes in his hand. Each envelope was marked with a blood-colored feather that represented urgency. Sal's heart sank. The changes in geological conditions that had occurred in various places due to the catastrophe were the results of the Wyvern Scouts' inspections. And these reports were the tribe's losses. Even if he didn't want to think about it, he knew that this was only the first wave. Put it down. Sal ordered a little dispiritedly. Sal, Wajin, and even Varrock sat down together and read each report as quickly as possible. They marked the losses on the sand table map of the chieftain's hall. After half a day, the result was shocking. Since the day of the catastrophe, more than 100,000 tribespeople had died. Some died in the disaster and more than 70% died under the raging elementals. There were reports of patrols and garrisons being attacked everywhere, but with the weapons in the hands of the orcs, it was difficult to cause any effective damage to the fire elemental creatures. The shaman was simply in short supply. Sal finally made a decision to convene a small meeting of the leaders. The participants included the troll leader Wajin, the Tauren chief Kane, the forgotten leader Dranish, the prince of trade Garavix, Sal's advisor, the old orc warrior Eitrig, and Gurus Hellscream. I think everyone knows what has happened to the tribe recently. Sal opened the meeting first. Gurus crossed his arms over his chest, his face full of displeasure. I know. The territory we conquered in the north was shamelessly stolen. The alliance refused to share the spoils of war with the tribe. And the damn black lizard, Nisario, because of his personal hatred with the Dragon Guardian and the alliance, launched a revenge on the entire planet, implicating the tribe. Wuxia couldn't help but say, "Young man, don't talk nonsense. The evil ancient gods have never stopped conspiring to destroy the world. Whether there is an alliance or not in this world, it will still—" Sal interrupted the troll chief. "Forget it, Wuxia, we have more important things to deal with." Dworkin gave Gurush a death stare and finally fell silent. Gurus snorted coldly and didn't even look at Wuxia. Their behavior gave Sal a big headache. However, Sal forcefully pulled the topic back. The serious problem we are facing now cannot be solved by swords and axes alone. The earthquake shook every piece of land, and the elemental creatures wreaked havoc in the countryside. I heard our planet Azeroth screaming in pain. If we don't solve this worldwide disaster, not to mention the Alliance tribe, all the creatures on this planet will be finished. This topic was so heavy that even someone as arrogant as Garrush fell silent. Sal continued, "My spies have just received news that Magni Bronzebeard, the Bronzebeard king of the Iron Furnace Fort, decisively turned himself into a diamond man through the earth slate in order to pursue the power of a demigod. I think it is time for the tribe to make sacrifices and concessions." Chapter 1763. Sacrifice and Concessions? Almost as soon as they heard these two words, Kane and Wuxia jumped up. "Great Chieftain, wait. Great Chieftain, you can't be," Sal waved his hand. "Don't get excited, sit down." His fierce order forced the two chieftains to sit down obediently. In the conference room, everyone pricked up their ears. "Yes, I am indeed going to follow Magni Bronzebeard's example and pursue the power of a demigod. In fact, my strength has long reached a bottleneck. As long as I take advantage of the time when the will of Azeroth asks for help to fight, I still have a good chance of success. Think about it, a real demigod, what that means to the tribe." Kane and Wuxia were all silent. The tribe was suppressed by the alliance, of course, because of the economy, technology, and military fields. The key was the lack of high-end combat power. Gruul, the king of Golan, could not be a match for the demigods of the alliance. After all, Gruul was only a demigod, not a real demigod. If the alliance and the tribe fought, Gruul would never be able to hold on, and he would run away or change sides in minutes. If the tribe could have a real demigod, at least in terms of high-end combat power, it would be possible to compete with the alliance. Even if they could not be on an equal footing with the alliance, they would at least have the power to resist. Everyone knew that Sal was very strong. Perhaps he was not the strongest warrior, nor was he the strongest mage, but in terms of overall combat power he was one of the best in the tribe. He had not been able to be promoted to a demigod, and he was also dragged down by the tribe's chores. Sal had no distractions and focused on becoming a demigod. With the will of Azeroth asking for help everywhere, there was a good chance for Sal to pass. Timing was something that could not be missed in minutes. Sal was a dual shaman of enhancement and elemental attributes. If he became a demigod, it would also be very helpful in suppressing the elemental disaster of Azeroth. In addition, the wise Wuxia also thought that if for this reason, Sal stepped down from the position of the chieftain of the tribe, it would also be politically a step back. Not only could it avoid the difficulties and accusations of the traditional orcs against Sal, but it could also let the mainstream traditional young orcs try. If it didn't work out, Sal, who had become a demigod, could still come back to preside over the situation. Just like Duke Marcus, the leader of the alliance, Duque had disappeared more than once, but as long as there was an effective ruling team, the alliance would not fall into chaos. When he returned as a demigod and regained control of the alliance with the aura of a king, the alliance soared again and again. So Sal becoming a demigod was definitely beneficial to the tribe. Now came the problem. If Sal wanted to advance, it would definitely take a long time. Leaving a power vacuum was the stupidest thing to do. Then, who would be suitable to be the next great chieftain? Woken swept his gaze across the audience and suddenly thought of a terrible possibility. Wuxia hurriedly asked, "Great Chief, what are you going to do? Although our world is collapsing every day and we've evacuated most of our people there are still 2/3 of Nagrand left. I plan to use the dark portal to return to Nagrand and ask my grandmother, who refuses to leave Nagrand, and the elementals there for help. How long? Kane asked. A few weeks, a few months, or even a year. I don't know how long an elemental demigod would need. After all, this is a completely unknown field. After all, as far as I know, several demigods in the Alliance are promoted at different times. The air was once again filled with silence. The tribe cannot be without a leader for a day. Sal emphasized, since everyone has no objection to me going to the demigod position, then let's discuss it. Who is the most suitable to be the next great chief of the tribe? Although it was a discussion and recommendation, it was actually the art of politics. The tribe was first established by the orcs, and at this moment the largest force in the entire tribe was still the orcs. Whether it was population, combat power, or political influence, the orcs had an absolute advantage. In this political situation, Sal actually had no choice. After a few hypocritical excuses, Thrall finally appointed Gurus Hellscream as the next great chieftain. Gurus, I'll leave the tribe to you. Unfortunately, because your battle record is not too impressive, I hope that you can launch a Mekegara after I announce my abdication, so that all the chiefs who are interested in the position of the great chief can challenge you fairly. I am deeply honored. Great chieftain, I bet on the name of Gurus Hellscream that I will not lose to any orc in Mekra. The chiefs of the other races all noticed that Gurush only mentioned the beastmen. Sal patted Gurus on the shoulder and sighed in his heart. He also knew that Gurush was too impulsive and was not a suitable great chieftain. However, he represented the traditional faction, the largest force among the orcs. Secondly, among the younger generation, there was really no other candidate other than him. It was like picking the tallest person among the shortest. It was like trying everything in a desperate situation. Sal was still worried and instructed, I know you are not ready to be a great chief, but I think Wajin, Kane, and Eitrig will give you a lot of useful advice. Gurush interrupted Thrall. No, I think I am ready. Moreover, no matter how many suggestions there are, isn't the final decision still made by the great chief himself? I think I have the vision to lead the tribe to prosperity. Sal choked on the spot and even the corners of his eyes twitched. In the end, thousands of words turned into a long sigh, and he lamented in his heart, as long as Gurus doesn't destroy the tribe. This was helplessness, and it was almost the only choice in a desperate situation. Without saying anything more, Sal patted Gurush's shoulder hard, which could be considered a form of encouragement. The news of Sal's resignation as great chief was also sent to Duque's desk at once. Everyone knew that the so-called Michaela was just a formality. Among the tribe's peers, no one would be able to defeat Gurus. Without waiting for Duque to be nervous, the other alliance leaders quickly made a proposal. An online throne meeting was immediately held. They were all old faces, and the only difference was that Muradin replaced his elder brother and appeared in the illusory projection. What do you think about Gurus Hellscream becoming the new great chief of the tribe? Duque asked. What the hell? That guy has a screw loose. Muradin was the first to complain, I've had enough of this guy in the Northwind Tundra. How stupid is the tribe to elect such a great chief? The leaders of the alliance quickly reached a consensus after talking for a while. Well, since everyone is of the same opinion, from the day Sal entered the Dark Portal, the alliance will officially launch a cold war against the tribe. Chapter 1764. I'll just quietly watch you show off. I'll never interrupt you. You're brainless and looking for trouble. Duque, the commander of the alliance and demigod of the Weave, had once again used an unreliable children's song to make his two daughters giggle. Aurelia could not stand it anymore and came forward to stop him. Who knew that Duque would actually grab her by the waist and carry her to the next room to practice swordsmanship. What time is this? I still have to look after my daughters. Aurelia exclaimed. Don't worry, don't we still have Sasha? Anyway, any one of you can support two babies. Duque said shamelessly. You. Although this was not reliable, it was the truth. Plus, she had been pregnant for quite a long time. No matter how strong Aurelia's maternal instincts were, she was still a woman. The accumulated pressure was released by Duque in a few attacks. Soon, the Windrunner sisters found that Duque was in a particularly good mood. It was rare that he would not let go of them. Obviously, the tribe has changed to a chief who is against the alliance. Why do I feel that you're in a good mood? Sasha asked. Gurus Hellscream, I prefer to call him Brainless Howl. Sal thought that as long as he was not too wasteful it would be fine. Even Sal himself probably couldn't imagine how brainless he could be. That is an existence that can constantly refresh a human's understanding of the bottom line of IQ and EQ. Duque held the Windrunner sisters but let out a smug sneer. It was the smile of a hunter watching his prey foolishly fall into a trap. Sal's judgment of the general trend was indeed not wrong. Azeroth was still in a constant state of trouble and suffering one disaster after another. Anyway, as long as powerful foreign enemies continued to exist, the Alliance would not launch a full-scale war against the tribe. Even if Gurus only had 5 points of intelligence, as long as he was willing to listen to the advice of Wajin and the others, he would fight for benefits and living space for the tribe through friction and confrontation. His reckless and arrogant personality was the best cover. Sal firmly believed that the think tank he left behind could hold the tribe's situation, or at least not collapse. Obviously, Sal had underestimated Garush's recklessness and the Alliance's reaction. In the Thmakra, that was supposed to be a routine event, Garush killed a chieftain from a medium-sized clan, White Eagle, with a single swing of his axe. In the death duel of Makra, it was normal for someone to die. The problem was that the White Eagle chief had laid down his weapon and begged for mercy. According to tradition, surrendering was a great humiliation, but the victor should not humiliate the loser and should spare the other's life. Garush, however, despised the other party for being a coward and still killed him without a care in the world. Then Gurus made a bold statement. If any chieftain other than the beastmen dares to come down, I will kill every single one of them. This undoubtedly cast a dark shadow over Makra. Everyone knew that the leader of the tribe had to be an orc. When Sar established the new tribe, he promised that the chiefs of other races would have the same status as the orc chief. Wasn't Garush slapping him in the face by saying that? Kane, Wajin, and Delano all had ugly expressions on their faces. Makra ended without any suspense. Among the younger generation, only Delano had a chance to defeat Garush. Of course, the young Salyafar wouldn't tear down his father and Sar's stage. As a result, Brainless Roar easily won with a crushing momentum. He succeeded as the Great Chieftain. After officially becoming the Great Chieftain, Wajin's first suggestion was to issue a notice to the Alliance. After all, the Horde and the Alliance were in an alliance, and the Horde also needed the Alliance's food to relieve the refugees. Sending a notice and hoping that the Alliance would send a king to participate in the Great Chieftain's succession ceremony was etiquette and a show of respect for the Alliance. Who knew that Garush would refuse? I am the Great Chieftain of the Horde. I only need to get the approval of the Beastmen. It has nothing to do with the other races, nor does it have anything to do with the despicable alliance that once enslaved our compatriots. I didn't immediately start a war to seek justice from that shameless alliance that stole Nascent's land, that's already for the sake of the Covenant. His speech, of course, won the cheers of the young beastmen, but it made the faces of the chieftains of the major races quite ugly. Because he had just scolded the trolls, Taurens, and Forsaken. The few big shots could only stiffen their faces and smile politely, pretending that they had heard wrong. Wajin's heart sank. He vaguely guessed Sar's thoughts. Judging from the results, Sar might have gone overboard. As the contact person who often contacted the Alliance's throne conference, Wajin could only trouble himself to let the troll mage open a portal and go to Stormwind City. The first place Wajin went to was not the Alliance headquarters in Stormwind City, but Duke Marcus Mansion. I came this time to inform the Alliance that our former great chieftain Sar decided to go back to Nagran to seek help from the elements in order to figure out the truth of the elemental rebellion. And the new great chieftain Garush Hellscream has officially taken office today. He is the son of Sir Marcus' only beastman general, Grom Hellscream. Wajin had already said it very tactfully. He couldn't say that Sar, in order to avoid the Alliance's monopoly of demigods, ran away to practice, and when he came back the Alliance would not bully them. Instead, he mentioned Howl's name indifferently and directly pointed out his relationship with Howl. This was the hope that the Alliance would look at the Buddha's face. Who knew? Oh. Sorry for troubling Sir Wajin. The Alliance knows. Sir Wajin, you can also go back. Wajin was directly slammed at the door. If it was someone else who treated Wajin like this, Wajin might be able to use his identity to suppress the other party. Unfortunately, it was Vashj who gave him a sanitary eye. The dignified Queen of the Fangs, now the demigod of Lake Azeroth, Lord Emir Lake Vashj, dressed in a black and white lace-made dress, guarded the door for Duque. Although it was said that Wajin gave a cold shoulder to a maid, the maid was too awesome. Anyway, Duque was the only one in the world who could let a demigod guard the door. Wu Jin was still a little unwilling to give up. "Excuse me, is Sir Marcus busy now?" "If you're not busy." Before Wu Jin finished speaking, he heard Du Muk's unique voice coming from a room not too far upstairs. "I'll just quietly watch you." This was an off-key singing. Giggle. This was the laughter of a little girl. Wu Jin's awkward smile was lost. Vashti crossed her hands, gently pressed them on her lower abdomen, and put on a very formal smile. "My master is indeed busy. There are not many important things in the world that are qualified to disturb the master." Even when Neltharion ran out earlier, he only dared to use a substitute to shout a few times. "You still have to get out." The subtext was, Wu Jin should also get out. Wu Jin could only casually say a few compliments and leave. Chapter 1765. Woken's scalp went numb. As the highest leader of the alliance, Duque's attitude meant that the upper echelons of the alliance had reached a consensus. Wu Jin naturally knew that Gurus had a very bad relationship with several leaders of the alliance during the northern expedition to Nocent. For example, the few dwarf leaders guarding the fearless fortress. From the looks of it, the alliance's unity against external enemies was quite serious. No, he should have seen through the tribe's clumsy excuse. It was clearly the alliance who had already informed them that it was the death dragon, Nisario, who had come out to cause trouble. Yet Thrall still used the excuse of confirming the elemental insurrection to abdicate. But when Wu Jin came, he really couldn't do anything. Because from the beginning to the end, Gurus did not authorize Wu Jin to invite the leader of the alliance to attend the succession ceremony of the tribal chief. They didn't even invite the leader of the alliance and wanted the elders of the alliance to give them the cold shoulder. Don't even think about it. Walking out of Duke Marcus' mansion, Woken knew that his efforts this time were mostly in vain. It was like sitting in a carriage and seeing that the carriage was about to crash. There was no way to save it. The only choice left was to jump out of the carriage and defend to reduce the damage. Sigh. After a long sigh, Wu Jin called out to his troll guards, "Let's go to the Storm Fortress to take a look." As expected, he was once again denied entry at Storm Fortress. "Our Majesty is busy with state affairs and has no time to see you." Bolvar for Dragon, as the regent of the kingdom in Varian's absence, held enough weight. Unfortunately, there was no sincerity either. Wu Jin used the teleportation portal of the Alliance and circled around several major cities of the Alliance. Of course, he didn't go to the elves. The High Elves were also known as the Blood Elves. They had fought against the great demons for thousands of years, and the hatred between them was so deep that it could not be dissolved. Even though the dark spear trolls of Woking did not have a direct conflict with the High Elves, racial hatred was just so unreasonable. Who the hell called you a troll? Wu Jin would not go to Silvermoon City to look for trouble. The only leader he saw was Jaina, who happened to be in Theramore. Jaina's attire was rather formal. She wore an aqua-blue mage robe with the glittering courtier's crown. Two water elemental elites who were obviously highly intelligent stood on both sides of her throne. A female high elven mage was waiting at the side with a faint smile on her lips. When Wu Jin made the announcement and expressed that the Horde was still on friendly terms with the Alliance, Jaina replied, "The Alliance is never stingy with our friends. When they were hungry, as long as the Alliance had something to eat, they wouldn't starve their friends. When there was trouble, even if it was a disaster that could destroy a planet, the Alliance would send out their entire army to rescue them. However, the Alliance doesn't mind slaughtering and roasting wild boars that wander into the crops." This was already a slap in the face. Woking felt his face burning. Let's not talk about the grudges between the Alliance and the Horde during the first and second Dark Portal. After the Horde went west to the Kalimdor continent, the Alliance was very kind. Facing an enemy that could destroy the world, the Alliance knew their priorities very well. When the Horde was in trouble as an ally, the Alliance was not stingy with their resources. The wood used to build the city of Orgrim was transported from the Elven Forest. When the Horde was famished, it was the Alliance who sold a small amount of food to the Horde to tide over the difficulties. When the Draenor evil orcs fell into madness, it was the Alliance who provided support such as holy water and food, allowing Sal to save his compatriots. When the Draenor Day was about to be destroyed, it was the Alliance who provided a large number of transport ships to rescue the 2 million orcs who were gradually lacking in resources and falling into despair. If it weren't for the bloodiest war between the two sides, the Alliance would have enslaved the orcs. If it weren't for the huge differences in appearance and culture between the two sides, Maybe the Alliance and the Horde would have become a unified organization instead of being independent and wary of each other as they were now. Wuxia argued with an almost argumentative tone. The Horde is also very difficult and Gurus is still young. It's inevitable that he's young. However, he's still growing rapidly. The Horde doesn't want Chief Gurus's previous unpleasant experience with the Alliance to extend to the present. Jaina raised her eyebrows. Oh? Is that so? But I know that Sal is actually younger than Gurus. Wuxia was speechless on the spot. This was because of seniority. Sal debuted very early and as the founder of the new Horde he was brothers with the older generation of Horde leaders such as Varric and Grom. As a last resort he could only call Gurus young man. Wuxia could only blush. I mean he's slightly young as a leader. But the Horde is established through force. As the winner of Makara, it's glorious for him to become the Horde's great chief. The Alliance doesn't care who the Horde's great chief is. That's our attitude. If we can talk, we talk. If we don't want to talk, we don't have to talk. Anyway, the Alliance will continue to implement the trade contract signed with the Horde until the contract expires, or the Horde unilaterally tears up the contract. After saying that, Jaina waved her hand. I still have official business to deal with, I won't see you out. Without waiting for Wuxia to say anything else, she flashed away and left the living room. This was Jaina's Mage Tower, and Jaina could freely travel to any place in the Mage Tower. Wuxia left Jaina's Mage Tower. He took the opportunity to observe Theramore. He was shocked to find that the Alliance had begun to unabashedly prepare for war. Civilians were lining up to evacuate Theramore by boat, and a layer of armor-like things were being added to the strengthened walls. More anti-aircraft cannons were being installed on the walls. The only thing that made Wuxia feel a little lucky was that he didn't see any heavy cannons. Most of the cannons installed by the Alliance were fast-firing, not large-caliber heavy cannons. This meant that the Alliance was guarding against the Horde's possible human wave tactics. But they had no intention of attacking. Because to blow up Orgrimmar's walls strengthened by multiple layers of magic arrays, heavy cannons of more than 200 millimeters were necessary. Wuxia still couldn't relax. With the mobilization and transportation capabilities of the Alliance would be able to transport the largest artillery to Durotor within a week even without the use of the teleportation portal. Damn it, the Alliance's reaction is more intense than I thought. This was the Alliance's deterrence and warning. After Wuxia returned to the Horde in disgrace, he almost joined forces with Kane and Delano to put pressure on the Horde to dispel the furious Gurus's idea of going to war against the Alliance. As a result, while Sal was seeking elemental support, Gurus started the war. But the target was changed to Feralas in the southwest of the Kalimdor continent. This used to be a paradise for neutral ogres and some slave merchants. In the Hammer of Doom, the merchants there even let Varian be a slave gladiator for a long time. When Sal was in office he never touched these neutral forces. Gurus, on the other hand, directly attacked them. Chapter 1766. When Duque heard that Gurus was attacking the neutral forces, Duque, who had snuck into Theramore's camp, laughed. Is the world black and white? Duque asked Jaina, who was sitting opposite him. I used to think so. But no. Jaina shook her head. That Gurus is just as you said. He's quite retarded. Duque raised his hand and Solarian poured Duque a glass of red wine. Duque gently swirled the glass, letting the aroma of the red wine waft out. Anyone, any race, whatever they do in the world will be remembered. If this was a world dominated by a single race, perhaps it would be better. Unfortunately, neither the humans nor the orcs are in control of hegemony in Azeroth. It's not impossible to wage war against the neutral forces and races just for the survival of the race. Jaina smiled. However, it will be difficult to attract more races to join the Horde in the future. Just like how the Alliance was never an organization made up of only one race, the Horde was the same. Simply killing would not make more races support the Horde, and it would even alienate the other races in the Horde. The brainless Roar seemed to be using the most desired war of the younger generation of orcs to obtain the land and resources they desired through conquest. However, these barbarians did not even care about the shamans, nor did they have the concept of sustainable use of resources. Now is not the time. Gurus has not broken the hearts of the other chiefs. Let's focus on solving the internal problems first. Ask Kale, that's to go to grim battle. Ask Bulang to bring the Second Alliance air fleet to cooperate with the Red Dragon Army and the Wild Hammer Dwarves. Grim Battle was an abandoned fortress in the east of the wetlands. Its history could be traced back to the Dwarven War of the Three Hammers. It was a fortress city built by the defeated Wild Hammer Dwarves. Although the Wild Hammer Dwarves won the subsequent raid by the Dark Iron Dwarves, Thorison's wife, Empress Morgard, died in the Battle of Grimbator. Before she died, she gave Grimbator an eternal curse. The Wild Hammer Dwarves eventually fled their cursed home, never to return, and moved to Eagle's Nest Mountain. During World War II at the Dark Portal, this place was once used by the Dragonmaw clan orcs under the guidance of Deathwing as a base to imprison the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza and train the tribe's Red Dragon cavalry here. Duque had saved the Red Dragon Queen, who had almost been tortured like a dog, and forged a deep friendship with her. After World War II, the area was practically abandoned. The dwarves were unwilling to take this fortress that had no resources and no real significance. In the end, only the Red Dragon army left behind a few adult red dragons to guard the place. With the arrival of the Cataclysm, Deathwing reappeared in Azeroth, and the Twilight Hammer disciples who were wanted by the Alliance all over the world had already been killed. However, with the support of the Black Dragon army, the Twilight Hammer worked together to drive away the red dragons here. They transformed the stone hall built by the dwarves into a training ground. So Grimbator had to fight again. However, this level of trouble was not worth the Alliance's hero squad. Jaina, although I don't think Gurus has the guts to attack the Alliance now, you'd better stay in Theramore, Duque ordered. Yo, I'm facing an army of 2 million orcs. What if I can't hold it? Jaina joked. Why don't you transfer Naxxramas to the top of Theramore's head for me? Duque laughed shamelessly. At that time the Horde will really have to go to war with the Alliance. Don't you want to? Jaina's bright eyes were full of a faint smile. Duque knew that this was also a test. Hey, I'm your man. Is it necessary to test me like this? Duque raised his hand in surrender. I wonder which fiancé threw me into the ice and snow of the Tirisful woodland and let me experience the cruelty of the orcs? Jaina teased. As smart as she was, it was impossible for her not to know Duque's intentions. At that time she might have been confused for a while, but after carefully experiencing it later she would definitely figure it out. Will you hate me for this? Duque asked. Jaina shrugged and spread her hands, pretending to be helpless. Then she sat over and leaned against Duque, her nimble and white fingers drawing circles on Duque's chest. Jaina's voice was faint. If I really hated you, I wouldn't have been willing to follow you for so many years without a title, and even be willing to bear your children. It's just that I never understood why you made me hostile to the orcs at the expense of scaring me back then. Later, after the Horde went west, you were so tolerant of the Horde, even a little indulgent with Sal? I almost thought you had changed, or maybe you weren't you. Duque inserted his fingers into Jaina's fluffy golden hair and stroked it lovingly. I'm sorry. From the past until now, I have always hoped that the Horde will completely withdraw from the stage of history. But what happened later? First, it was because of the situation. The enemies that were more ferocious than the Horde came wave after wave. Second, it could be said that I felt the guidance of fate. Fate was simply metaphysics. It could be said that it existed, but it could also be unreliable. However, Duque had been right for so many years that Jaina had long been convinced. She had to believe it even if she didn't want to. What about this time? Jaina caressed Duke's face and blew into Duel's ear. This girl was clearly using her womanhood to her advantage. Duque was speechless. If it weren't for the fact that this girl had been his sword practice partner for many years, eating her up, brainwashing and instigating her, and achieving the unlocking of all the postures, she would have been completely obedient to him. She even bought the ticket for the ship. Duke might really think that she was that girl who sold her father in history. It's not the right time. It wasn't that he didn't want revenge, it was just that it wasn't the right time yet. Jaina was exceptionally intelligent and understood immediately. Hey, since it's not the right time, why did you still want me to come to the front lines? What if I can't escape? Jaina started to act spoiled. Completely helpless, he could only smile bitterly as he took out a seemingly perfect gem and gave it to Jaina. Wow. It's so beautiful. The energy of this thing. No wonder Jaina was so shocked. This thing looked perfect at first, like the eyeball of a blue dragon. As a radiant moon mage, Jaina immediately sensed the terrifying energy contained within it as soon as she touched it, as well as the astonishing Titan runic magic formation. This is, you can call it, mass-produced focusing rainbow. Focusing rainbow? Mass-produced? What the hell was this? Chapter 1767. Focusing rainbow. As the most powerful arcane energy in Azeroth, the Titans gave the blue dragons a magical artifact to control magic. It helped Maligos the Hairweaver manage the magic of Azeroth. If necessary, it could even absorb the arcane energy of the entire Azeroth, but this would make it extremely unstable. Once it exploded, it would be enough to blow up the entire Azeroth into a second Outland. In the original history, in the next important time node, Pandaria's Mystery, Gur's Hellscream used the blue dragon artifact, Focusing Rainbow, to condense a magic bomb, and threw it over to destroy Theramore like a nuclear bomb. In order to save Jaina, Ronan, the exemplary character of human lousy promotion, sacrificed his life. This is one of the greatest crimes of Garrosh in history. And because Theramore, which had been operating for decades, was destroyed, Jaina's hair turned white overnight, and she became an extremely extreme, almost crazy person. She was blinded by hatred and became unable to see the general situation. Even when she returned to the Dalajan Kirin Tor assembly, she tried her best to advocate ignoring foreign enemies and directly declaring war on the Horde. She was just short of being further corrupted in the game and then being pushed down as a boss in a dungeon. However, in this life, Gur still wanted to play with the nuclear bomb Focusing Rainbow. He had to ask Duque first. This is a mass-produced version of Focusing Rainbow. It's a bit like a small magic net and can absorb all arcane energy within a 30-mile radius. You can set the time when it releases the energy again. That is, when you throw it out it will explode in about a few seconds, Duque said seriously. Power? If it's just this operation it can probably flatten 1/10 of Theramore. When Duque said this, Jaina's expression suddenly changed. Theramore was quite huge. After 11 years of construction with the full support of the Alliance, Theramore was a full 10 kilometers long and wide, which was 100 square kilometers. Blowing up 10 square kilometers at once was definitely more powerful than all the cannons of today, and even the main magic cannons of the Dalajan. Jaina noticed the other meaning in Duque's words. Then what about the other operation? Connect to the magic net and draw in a large amount of arcane energy for a short period of time. In theory it can cause an even more powerful explosion, but the duration of the explosion will become uncontrollable, and it will cause part of the weave to collapse. Duque shrugged. Unless you're planning to die with your enemy, please don't play this game. You're not immortal. When Jaina heard the first half of Duque's sentence, she was so scared that her face turned pale. However, she soon felt Duque's concern and deep love. With this, even if Gurus brought his entire tribe to Dustwallow Swamp, he still wouldn't be able to take down Theramore. No, it should be said that even if they succeeded they would vomit 18 liters of blood. Woo-woo. Master, your disciple is becoming more and more fond of you. What should we do? After saying that, Jaina immediately offered artificial respiration. Duque accepted it calmly and handed the mass-produced Focusing Rainbow to Jaina. This thing is for you to protect yourself. Although it can be mass-produced, it's best not to use it. After all, the material of this thing was too bad. Anyway, you know it's related to the blue dragon's body. Jaina stuck out her tongue. Was this considered as no trade, no killing? After making arrangements with Jaina, Duque passed through the portal and went directly to Dawn Island in the middle of Lordamere Lake. As soon as he stepped out of the portal, Duque saw that Vasht was already in the form of a Naga, waiting respectfully with a group of subordinates. On the shore there was the giant water elemental Lord Unstable Hydas, the male Naga Deepwater Lord Karethres, and the deep-sea giant Morogar Tidewalker. In the deep water a little further from the shore, there was the huge island-like fish-shaped monster Jisra with most of its body exposed. They were all the bosses in Draenor's Serpent Temple back then. Now that their fate had changed, they had followed Vasht and become the vassal forces of the Alliance. Looking out, the elite Naga guards and Naga priests were lined up densely in the distance. Further away there were countless Murlocs. These guys, who used to quarrel all day, were all quietly crawling in front of Duque. Sometimes, Duque couldn't help but sigh that fate made fools of people. However, it was because of Duque's constant stirring up trouble that those forces that were originally destroyed and the bosses that were destined to step into death were all pulled back to become his subordinates. This was why the Alliance was strong and prosperous today. In the future, when fighting against the Burning Legion that came again, they would have more confidence. Duque took a deep breath. Although he was already a demigod and breathing was just an action that could not be done, he always retained the habits of being a human. Duque believed that only humans were the true saviors of this world. He spat out the foul air in his lungs and said loudly, "Everyone from the storm Naga. I have saved you from death. I have given you a future and hope. But this is not without conditions. I think you know what I am here to do today?" The Deepwater Lord Carithres took the lead, knelt on one knee and shouted, "I am willing to die for Master Duke Marcus." All the lords, all the elites and thousands of aquatic powerhouses knelt down in unison. "I am willing to die for Master Duke Marcus." Death was not just a simple fanaticism. In a sense, this was a more transcendent existence, a more ideal destination. Every single one of them had personally witnessed how the dead humans and powerful creatures had fused with the weave and become immortal existences. For example, the frost dragon Saffron, the Archbishop of Holy Light Alonso's Fail. Mortals and things would eventually die or decay. Being loyal to their own demigod Vasht and Vasht's master Duque was the true way of kings. Therefore, the loyalty of these aquatic powerhouses who had changed their name to Storm Naga was not false. Seeing the fanaticism in these guys' eyes, Duque was quite satisfied. Very good. Now the world has changed. The water elemental plane is the plane closest to Azeroth. I can feel that the water elemental Lord Tidehunter Neptulin did not personally participate in this world-destroying operation. He is destined to be a thorn in Netherio's side. Perhaps he will be in big trouble. Perhaps he wants to remain neutral, or he is purely acting according to circumstances. At this point, Duque paused, then continued, "The Alliance needs to unite more powerhouses to fight against evil. What you have to do is to persuade him. Use words or force to persuade him to join this war against Netherio." Suddenly, the unstable Hedis asked in a muffled voice, "What if he refuses?" Chapter 1768. Was it another black and white issue? Duque had a slightly strange expression on his face. "That's not important. If he refuses to participate in the war against Netherio, then make him hand over part of his water elemental authority to Vasht. Let Vasht fight in his place. I think if he was rescued from a desperate situation he would be very happy to do so." When Duque said this, all the members of the Storm Naga clan understood. They could not let the Tidehunters kneel, but if this coward refused to work, then they would squeeze him dry. Vasht swayed her snake tail and came in front of Duque. She crossed her 3 pairs of arms in front of her chest and bowed. "My master Vasht will obey your orders." Duque did not say much, and Vasht also understood what Duque meant. Anyway, as long as Neptulin was not beaten into a dog, Vasht did not have to do anything. Duque pressed his hands on Vasht's shoulders, and Vasht's body suddenly trembled. After following Duque for so long, she of course knew that Duque did not like non-humanoid monsters. She was also disgusted with her Naga form. But she had no choice. If she did not appear in the form of a Naga, it would be difficult to convince the Nagas and sea monsters under her. Duque rarely touched her body in the Naga form. Duque was willing to press her slippery, scaly shoulders, largely because of what he was about to say next. "I'm going back to Vasht. Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine." The only part of Vasht's body that did not turn back into a Naga was her head. Her smooth white face leaned down and pressed against the back of Duque's right hand. She intimately rubbed it a few times. "I am both Vasht and Master Saleya. Both of them are me. And it is because of Master that I did not go crazy during those long dark times. With the destruction of the Well of Eternity, the city of the High Elves, Vaskar, sank into the sea. Elven Queen Azhara and her High Elven followers could not escape this catastrophe. Although they escaped death, the price of their lives was Enzoth turning them into terrifying Naga sirens. Now time had washed away the history of the High Elves. Many people had already forgotten this painful lesson. But Vasht was definitely an exception. Back then the Lord of Vastar's city had been her mother, Lysariel Vastar. Because of her mother she was able to enter the Azhara palace and serve Queen Azhara, becoming the queen's maid. After Vastar sank to the bottom of the sea with Azhara city, Vastar had been Vastar's territory for the past 10,000 years. Until she led the Naga of her clan to seek refuge with Illidan. This time, following the Great Cataclysm, the water elemental plane and Azeroth's greatest overlap was Vastar. This caused the water elemental in Vastar to riot and produce a terrifying resonance. It passed through the abyss of the sea and reverberated throughout the world of Azeroth for a long time. To solve the problem of Vaster, there was no one more suitable than Vaster and her Storm Naga. Perhaps there had been other Naga clans who did not have eyes and came to take over, but as a demigod, everything would be easily solved. Through the almost non-existent plane barrier near Vaster, they could reach the throat of the abyss. The throat of the abyss was an ocean located in the elemental plane. It was the source of all water elemental and the territory of the water elemental lord, Neptulin. It was constantly brewing and using waves and storms to attack the land that was surrounded by it. Normally, unless mortals relied on special methods, they would not be able to get close to this godforsaken place. The Naga were originally aquatic creatures, but it was different. Without a doubt, this was their backyard. Duque sent the Storm Naga there so it was safe. Seleka, remember safety first. Yes. After saying goodbye softly, thousands of Naga and Murlocs jumped into the water under Vaster's lead. The entire sea was filled with bubbles from the rapid diving of these aquatic creatures. 10 minutes later, the entire island suddenly became empty. That was not entirely true. At least the Murloc prophet Mogr had stayed. As the leader of hundreds of thousands of Murlocs, he was already Vaster's other deputy, and his position was only below the Deepwater Lord, Carathress. Look after Lord Amir Lake. Understood, my master. Mogr bowed deeply to Duque. A day later, in the deep sea northwest of Stormwind City, a huge army arrived at Vaster. Vaster swayed her snake tail and came to a seemingly ordinary high platform. She raised her hand and gently wiped off the thick moss on a stone tablet. If not for her actions, anyone would think that this stone tablet was an ordinary deep-sea stone. When she finished wiping the stone tablet, she was shocked to see that the stone tablet was written in the High Elven language. This tablet commemorates the benevolent leader, our beloved Lady Lisserel Vaster. For 100 years she has guided the people of the glimmering city Vaster into an era of endless prosperity. May she and her daughter, the dazzling Lady Vaster, continue to illuminate the way forward for our people in the darkness for the next 100 years. Vaster seemed to be muttering to herself. It was the Naga's special sound wave language underwater. My master. The one who truly illuminates the way forward in the darkness is you, not me. And Vaster is my surname, not my name. My name. Forget it, from the day you saved me I am Vaster Ubateria Vaster. Vaster smiled gracefully, and then there was no trace of a smile on her face. She raised her trident high and pointed it forward. Storm Naga. Attack, destroy all who resist. The queen's clear voice spread throughout the dark underwater world. Beside her, Carathress, who was even more burly, raised his weapon. Attack, destroy all who resist. Tell those thieves who is Vaster's master. Attack. Thousands of voices responded. They converged into one, and then turned into an incomparably huge war machine, beginning to rush into every corner of the underwater city of Vaster. The surrounding water constantly fluctuated greatly. With the scouring of the underwater turbulence, there were red waves everywhere. Vaster was like this. Just like her current position, she did not participate in the battle. She stood on the triangular roof of the tallest temple in this underwater city, ostentatiously displaying her divine power fluctuations. She was declaring her ownership of this underwater city, and also longing for a challenger with enough weight to appear. Unfortunately, there was none. The one who occupied this place was merely a second-rate Naga clan. She did not even need to do anything. Yusler had already swallowed the guy whose name it did not even know into its stomach. Chapter 1769. Duque realized that he was actually a bit like a superstar going to one show after another. In fact, Duque should be happy. His subordinates were strong and they did not have their own masters, but rather they had their own goals. Moreover, the emergence of more peerless powerhouses was a preview of the full-blown war when the Burning Legion invaded in the future. After all, this time Nesario, Alikir and Ragnaros had come together. 10 years ago, all three of them would have been big bosses that could destroy the world. If he were to gather all the elites together and defeat the enemies one by one like in the past, it would mean that he would let the other two go. Unfortunately, no matter which one he let go of, it would cause unimaginable destruction to Azeroth. Splitting up to fight against the enemy was already inevitable. No matter how reluctant Duque was, he had to start learning to let go. And the biggest difference from history was that the Alliance now had the capital to split up. When Duque rushed to Silvermoon City, he happened to run into the elves' farewell party for Queen Sylvanas. This time, Sylvanas' target was the Wind Elemental Lord Alikir. Just as Sylvanas was about to push open the door to the farewell party hall, Duque arrived. Yo Duque. We sisters almost thought that the three of yous combined couldn't compare to your maid. Queen Sylvanas teased Duque. That's right. At this moment beside Queen Sylvanas were Aurelia and Sasha, who were dressed in military attire and ready to go to war. The three Windrunner sisters had not gone to war for a long time. He had to admit that the physique of the elves was against the rules. After Aurelia and Sasha gave birth to a daughter, not only did their figure not change, but their breasts were also a grade bigger. Seeing this, the other women around Duke were all envious and jealous. Duque was drooling. Unfortunately, women like the three Windrunner sisters were destined to put the survival of the world as their top priority. They were leading by example, shouldering the future of the entire elven race with their seemingly thin and weak shoulders. Even though Duque didn't think that they were the kind of wife and loving mother he knew from the first day he started dating them, his daughter wasn't even a year old yet, and they had already chosen to fight. This kind of courage. Should he say that it was no wonder their surname was Windrunner? Duque shrugged in the face of Queen Syriana's teasing. Then he went over to each of them and gave them a hug and a kiss. After a long kiss, Aurelia raised her eyebrows and smiled. How surprising. I thought you would use her as an excuse to stop me. Your name is Windrunner, not Canary. When I first met you, I seemed to see a high-spirited warhorse that was eager to enter the battlefield. Why did I have to bind a gust of wind if it was foolish? I'm already very sorry that I've used my child to hold you back for 2 years. Humph. It's good that you know. Sasha pouted. She looked very cute when she was angry. Duque, don't you have anything to tell us? Queen Syriana asked with her arms akimbo and her chest puffed out. Don't be stopped by trash like Alikir. Back then, Sargeras had defeated all the ancient gods and elemental lords. And our future enemy is destined to be Sargeras, who has returned from the bottomless abyss. Duque wasn't looking down on the enemy, but it was a disguised form of encouragement. Alikir was strong, but he wasn't the final destination of the three Windrunner sisters. He was just a mountain that they would pass by. Only Sargeras was the real destination that everyone had to work hard to cross. The three Windrunner sisters said in unison, "We understand." Queen Syriana held Duque's arm as they walked out of the farewell hall. In the past, countless elves used to look at Duke with envy and even hatred as he was the man who had taken away their queen's body and mind. However, as Duke became a demigod, all the jealousy and hatred disappeared, and all that was left was admiration. That kind of formulaic speech couldn't attract Duque's attention. Although the elves were applauding and cheering for Queen Syriana's speech, Duque's mind had already flown to the southernmost part of the Tanaris Desert, Uldum. There were a total of 3 Titan bases on planet Azeroth. The other 2 were Uldaman in the Barren Land and Uldur in Northren's Storm Peak. Mortals knew the most about Uldaman. It was the place where the Titans created the ancestors of the dwarves, Rockjaws, and Earth spirits. It was because the Earth spirits were cursed with flesh and blood that the dwarves of today came into being. Uldur was the place where the Titans left the Guardians on the continent of Azeroth lived. It was once filled with the Storm Giants and their slaves, the Crystal Puppets. It was also dominated by the ancient god Yaxran. With the battle of the allied forces, Uldur had been liberated. Even the Guardian Dragons and the Titan Guardians knew very little about Uldur. With the consent of the Guardian Tarim, the leader of the Alliance was able to ask Uldur's central computer again. According to Uldur's records, it was confirmed that Uldur used to be the Titans' climate research center in the world of Azeroth, and perhaps it still was. It might still contain the blueprints of the Titans' transformation of the world, including mountains, rivers, seas, and all kinds of creatures. Before the cataclysm, the Titans set up an extremely complicated and powerful Titan barrier for the entire Uldur. Even the Titan Guardians themselves could not enter it. But with the collapse of the Azeroth elemental barrier, Uldur became accessible for the first time in 25,000 years. For Nesario, who was keen on creating new species of dragons such as the Twilight Dragon, there was mysterious information he could not refuse. There were a total of 3 core areas in Uldur. One was the Hall of Origins, that had mastered the mysterious power of the Titans. Due to Duque's special instructions, the archaeological team belonging to Bulang Bronzebeard had gone deep into the Hall of Origins of Ulder as soon as possible after the cataclysm. According to the preliminary reports, this pyramid covered in sand and gravel was a place that archaeologists dreamed of. Precious ancient relics and terrifying automatic defense systems could be seen everywhere. But according to the ancient language on the stone tablets discovered at this stage, archaeologists suddenly discovered that there was an even more important treasure hidden in these halls. A secret that could threaten the entire Azeroth, a weapon of mass destruction that could recreate all life in Azeroth. The leaders of the Alliance believed that the invaders of Ulder, led by Nesario, obviously knew this secret and hoped to use this treasure as a weapon. Finding and protecting the Hall of Origins was no longer just an academic need. Chapter 1770. Therefore Brian Bronzebeard, Illyria Riataline, Hadron Brightwing and Millhouse Mana Storm would be in charge of the path in the Hall of Origins. These 5 hero-level powerhouses were Brian Bronzebeard, Illyria Riataline, Hadron Brightwing and Millhouse. In the Uldum region there was also a new race, the Catmen. During the creation of the world the Titans also created a mysterious race, the Catmen, Torville. They were used to guard the Titans' research facility in Uldum, and Torville's lost city was where they once lived and fought. But with the appearance of the wind elemental plane, Torville, which was the closest to them, naturally became their first target to conquer the world. The main opponents in the Torville dungeon were the Catman General and the spiritual leader, but the final opponent was the culprit sent by the wind elemental lord to bewitch the Torvilles, Hiamat. Torville's lost city was the stronghold of Nephiselt. Nephiselt was one of the Catmen Torvilles, and the flesh curse had turned their stone skin into flesh. In fact, almost as soon as the cataclysm happened, Deathwing's forces infiltrated Uldum faster than the dwarven archaeologists. Torville swore allegiance to Deathwing in exchange for a chance to remove the flesh curse. After signing a dark contract with Deathwing and his army, Nephiselt Torville, who had regained their stone skin, retreated to their ancient capital, the lost city, in the Venel River Delta, and continued to threaten the entire Uldum. However, after the curse was lifted, the gang of Torwills turned around to bite back at their benefactor. Even so, because Nephiselt had already signed a dark contract, the distortion and malice in them could never be removed. The lost city was easy to defend and difficult to attack. The periphery was surrounded by steep mountains and swamps filled with crocodiles. Even if there was no garrison in the city, it was difficult to invade. What was worse was that the commander of Nephiselt was Lord Southwind, Hiamat, who had given them new power. She was one of the most powerful servants under Deathwing and Alkir. Even though he was a powerful enemy and an unshakable general, the fact that Hiamat appeared in the lost city might also be an opportunity. After strengthening a large number of troops and corrupting Nephiselt, he did not have much power left. A truly powerful team of heroes might be able to sneak into the city and assassinate Lord Southwind before he recovered his power. This task was given to Sasha. She would team up with Merid, Vanessa, Sally Whitemane and Solarian, the great astrologer, in order to complete the mission quickly. The teams formed by these two groups of heroes were just side divisions. Their main force was still dealing with the wind elemental lord Alkir. If Alkir was at his peak, Duque wouldn't have dared to let Queen Sylvie face him. In fact, after the World War 25,000 years ago, whether it was the 4 great ancient gods or the 4 elemental lords, after they died once, they were no longer as brave as they were in the past. Thus, Duque sent out Servanas, Gavin Rad and Stormwarden Amaron. The 3 of them would head straight for the Wind God Throne located in the void southwest of Uldum. In the past, the Wind God Throne only existed in the Wind Elemental Plane. It was the lair of the Wind Elemental Lord Alkir, floating high in the endless sky wall. Now the barrier of the Elemental Plane had been broken. In order to prevent Alkir from wandering freely in the wind of Azeroth, it was a good idea to take the initiative to attack. Otherwise, when Alkir tamed all the winds in the southern sky of Kalimdor and gathered the fiercest storm, it would be too late. His appetite couldn't be too small. Obviously, cleansing all life in Uldum and occupying the mysterious Titan creation, the Hall of Origins, would only be his starting point. When he and Ragnaros each controlled all the wind and fire elements in Azeroth, that would be the real world-destroying cataclysm. Even without Nesario, who controlled the earth elements taking action, they alone could destroy all the creatures in Azeroth. Flames burned everything. Strong winds suffocated all living things. Duque had already tested it. In this fantasy world, the wind element was a special element that included air. Taking away the wind element would also mean taking away the air. Any creature that had to breathe was dead. Strong winds alone weren't enough. After all, there were things like the undying and ghosts in this world. Don't forget that there were also flames. If Ragnaros really attacked without limit, even the undying would be finished. Duque let out a long sigh of relief. While he was thinking, Queen Sylvanas had also completed the declaration before the expedition. After all, it was not an expedition of an army, and there was no grand military parade. After Queen Sylvanas announced the various appointments, she once again appointed Theron as the regent and officially set off. In front of hundreds of elves, Sylvanas gave a hot kiss without hesitation. "Don't worry, my dear. I'll deal with Alakir and come back to give birth." Duque grimaced and lamented in his heart, "Son, or rather daughter, you have a mother who dares to fight and fight. I really don't know if you're lucky or unlucky." What else could Duque say to such a tough Queen Sylvanas? He could only roll his eyes. It's good to get it done before the Burning Legion fully invades. Those who had stepped into the divine realm were so capricious. As long as they were given enough divinity and energy, giving birth was more like a process of splitting elements or powers. Duque estimated that Queen Sylvanas did not even have to suffer the pain of childbirth and could directly give birth without pain. Other women probably wouldn't be able to enjoy such a 666 method. The women of the Windrunner family had always been swift and decisive. They did not have too many romantic feelings and did what they had to do. During peacetime, when they were bored, perhaps they could roll in bed with Duque every day. Even as a queen, they could completely unlock all the positions. Once they entered the war, these gentle, beautiful and sexy female elves would transform into the most heroic rangers and fight on the front line against evil. Without looking back, they stepped into the portal that Duque opened and went to meet Gavin Rad and the others. Duque sighed softly and then bitterly rushed to the next battle, Teldrassil. This was because another traitor had finally surfaced. In the third battle and the Battle of Hyjal, the Night Elves lost their world tree Nordrassil and thus their immortality. The generous Night Elves could accept this fact. However, the human heart was always the most complicated thing. Once you had it, you would not be willing to lose it. Under such circumstances, Fandral Staghelm convinced the other Night Elves and finally united with the Druids to create a new world tree, Teldrassil. Chapter 1771. Originally, Fandral did not have the final say in the Cenarian Circle. Unfortunately, Malfurion, who could keep Fandral in check, entered the Emerald Dream after the Battle of Mount Hyjal. No one knew the reason and no one knew how to wake him up again. Naturally, Fandral replaced him and became the Archdruid. Without Malfurion's interference, Fandral could do whatever he wanted. Since ancient times, the Druids and the Cenarian Circle formed by the Druids had never been under the jurisdiction of the royal authority or any other regime. Even though Tyrande was the spokesperson of the divine authority among the Night Elves and held the highest authority among the Night Elves, she had no right to stop Fandral's actions. Without Malfurion, the only one who had the ability to stop Fandral was the former Druid mentor, the halfling Cenarius. Coincidentally, Grom had chopped the shit out of him with his axe. Moreover, most of the Night Elves yearned for immortality again. Tyrande could only acquiesce. However, even though the New World Tree grew rapidly and the incomparably gigantic thickets could be seen from the northern coast of Kalandar, the Night Elves settled down here and began to build their first new city in thousands of years. All of this was not as perfect as Fandral had imagined. The Night Elves did not regain the ability to live forever. It was very simple. Teldrassil did not receive the blessings from the Dragon Kings like Nordrassil. After all, Alexstras's blessing was to protect the safety of the Well of Eternity. Now the new Well of Eternity had exploded. The cruel reality had proven that the Night Elves did not have the ability to protect the Well of Eternity alone, and there was no need to protect the new Well of Eternity. Therefore, there was no need to renew the benefits of immortality for the Night Elves. As a result, Teldrassil began to gradually decay. Satyrs, inferior demons and other monsters also began to treat this place as their home. After Duque sent Queen Sylvanas off, Duque received a message from Tyrande. As soon as Duque stepped out of the portal in the Elune Temple, Tyrande came to greet him. Dressed in a moon-white priestess robe, Tyrande looked so holy. At this moment she was the most devout priestess of the goddess. The signs you spoke of have indeed appeared. Tyron looked worried. Fandral has summoned many druids to Teldrassil in preparation for the plan to heal the world tree. Navarax, Brawl Bearskin, Hamel Runtotem and other great druids have all received his summons. He summoned the druids in the name of the Cenarian Council's chairman. I feel that there is something wrong, but I have no right to stop him. You said that when this happens I have to inform you immediately. As one of William's trio, Brawl was the chief druid of the Alliance's hero group, so there was no need to introduce him. Navarax had long ago druid of druids. Long before Sar led the orcs west to the Kalimdor continent, a group of claw druids discovered a complex underground cave in the heart of the barren lands. At that time, as the leader of this group of druids, Night Elf Navarax firmly believed that as long as he could connect to the Emerald Dream in the cave, he could transfer the energy of the dream to the spring in the cave and restore the barren lands to its former glory. However, Navarax's imagination had unfortunately turned into a nightmare, and the howling caves had also changed. There were venomous snakes, velociraptors, wind snakes and crocodiles everywhere. The springs and crevices had also rotted. In a sense, this guy was a troublemaker with good intentions. Hammer Runtotem was the chief of the Tauren Runtotem family, the disciple of Malfurion Stormrage, and the advisor of Cairn Bloodhoof. In the future he would also become the advisor of Cairn's son, Smash Bane. He was also the first non-dream elf druid to receive the title of Great Druid. Although Hammer was not the first Tauren druid, he was indeed the first Tauren druid to regain the way of nature. Fandral had summoned so many great druids in one go. Duque gently stroked Tyron's green hair. Don't worry, you did well. It's time to deal with Fandral Staghelm. Please call the core members of the Elune Sisterhood, Chandri's Feathermoon and other important Alvan generals. Also be prepared to communicate with Elune at any time. Come with me. Tyrande immediately realized that the situation was far more serious than she had imagined. Duque must have sensed something. Can you tell me who the enemy is this time? Tyrande asked with a straight face. The King of Nightmares, Savis. Upon hearing this name, Tyrande could not help but reminisce about the darkest times. In a sense, it was Savis who had followed Queen Azhara's orders to seek a higher level of power and life in the universe. That was how he had formed a connection with the Burning Legion, and that ancient war that could be said to be a catastrophe for the entire planet of Azeroth. However, Savis, the night elf's known sycophant, had finally escaped and obtained a new life under the hands of the ancient god Enzos. He became the virus, cancer, mastermind and culprit that invaded the Emerald Dream. For the past 10,000 years, Isra, who monitored and controlled the Emerald Dream, had always hoped to catch him but to no avail. He was too cunning and almost no matter what he did not reveal his true form. No matter what methods Isra used to ambush or lure him, the most he could do was capture some of the fragments of his will. However, he used the unreal nature of the Emerald Dream to continuously infiltrate the dreams of the Guardians of the Emerald Dream, invading and corroding the green dragons. Not long ago, a large number of ancient dragons had almost fallen from the Emerald Dragon army. For example, after the Molten Core, there had almost been a repeat of the 4 great green dragons that had fallen. If not for Duque's warning to Isra, the Green Dragon army would have lost a few ancient dragons that could fight. Hearing Savis's name, Tyrande's expression turned ugly. I think we need to find a way to wake Malfurion up. This had nothing to do with personal feelings. It was purely because Malfurion, who controlled the power of the Emerald Dream, was an ideal candidate to fight against Savis. Tyrande bit her lip and seemed to hesitate but still said, Duque, don't you know soul magic? I agree with you using it on Malfurion. Duque shook his head. It has nothing to do with that. I already know that Malfurion fell into a deep sleep because he was trapped by the nightmares of the King of Nightmares. He has been having nightmares for the past few years. I have already solved this riddle. All that's left is to wait for the actors to arrive. Tyrande's eyes widened. Chapter 1772. The reason why the snitches could cause such devastating destruction was because they stirred up trouble from the inside. The strongest fortress was always breached from the inside. As the most unreasonable one-step transmigrator, he was best at beating up the snitches. From Kel Thazad, who was still a human during the Second Dark Portal War, to Benedicta's who had just been exposed to Fandral Staghelm, 3 hours later, The great druids of the Cenarian Circle gathered below the World Tree, Teldrassil. Fandral Staghelm was making a speech. The World Tree is the glory of Kadorii. It is the legacy that Kadorii lives on. Without the World Tree, Kadorii is not even worthy of being called Kadorii. Look, Teldrassil is drying up and more cracks appear on the trunk. As the protectors and coordinators of nature, can we sit back and watch this happen? Fandral waved his hand and made a sweeping gesture. No. We can't sit back and watch this happen. With that, he raised a statue that had 4 legs and was in the shape of a centaur, but its body was decorated with many leaves. As the chairman of the Cenarian Circle, I formally propose a motion to use the statue of Remulos to heal the World Tree. Remulos was the son of the demigod Cenarius. After the death of Cenarius, he became the protector of the Moonlight Woodland. Despite the war, this sacred land still preserved its innocence. As the former home of the demigod Cenarius, the Moonlight Woodland bathed in eternal moonlight. After the destruction of the Well of Eternity in the Third Dark Portal War, the Night Elves were blessed by Elune and built a home for the Druids here. The Moonlight Woodland once again became a safe harbor for the Elves. Most of the Night Elves who did not move to Teldrassil stayed in the Moonlight Woodland, which was surrounded by ancient forest trees and had almost no contact with other races in the outside world. After Malfurion fell into a deep sleep, Remulos provided a lot of help to the young druids. As the son of a demigod, a creature with a powerful divinity, and the symbol of the new generation of druids, Remulos had a very high reputation among the druids. For a moment there was a lot of agreement around. The lower and middle druids thought it was a good idea, but the archdruids instinctively felt that something was wrong. Brawl Bearmantle was the first to speak. No one can deny that Teldrassil is a miracle of the world. It is a magnificent natural landscape created by us druids through the magic of Azeroth itself. But even such a huge tree had to go through life and death like any other living thing. However, Teldrassil is abnormally sick in his prime. It's not malnutrition or physical damage but sickness. This is very abnormal. I think we need to find the cause first instead of using magic to cure it. Brawl's words were pertinent and reasonable. But his argument was immediately rejected by Fandral. Teldrassil is withering, it needs more nutrients. We used magic to hasten its growth, so we should give it more magic. As long as its body is strong enough, it can ignore all pests and diseases. Fandral's high-sounding argument was refuted by a sharp female voice. Hee. Just like how you poisoned Malfurion with morning wheat, while claiming that you were going to rescue him? To be as shameless as you are, you must be one of the best among traitors. The one who spoke was naturally Tyrande Whisperwind, the highest leader of the Night Elves and the spokesperson of the moon goddess Elune. These words caused an uproar among the druids. What was going on? This was no longer a quarrel but a fight to the death. A fight to the death. Ever since the Elune Sisterhood and the druids seized power from Queen Azhara 10,000 years ago, the Night Elves had been in a parallel political system that had nothing to do with each other. The moon goddess belonged to the moon goddess and the druids belonged to the druids. Although their doctrines were similar and their origins were the same, the bosses were actually different. The Elune Sisterhood was a typical divine path, and the will of Elune was absolute. The druid doctrine was based on the harmony of nature, and even the founder of the religion, Cenarius, was only the highest teacher, not the ruler. The two factions respected and helped each other, and this was how they had been for the past 10,000 years. Now that Tyrande had suddenly launched an attack, if there was no concrete evidence, it might cause a civil war among the Night Elves. The druids saw that Tyrande had not only brought Duke Marcus, the higher-ups of the Elune Sisterhood, Chandri's Feathermoon and other generals, she had also brought over 1,000 sentries from the Moon Goddess Temple. Just this was enough to cause them to be in an uproar. High Priest Whisperwind, please be careful with your words. May I ask, do you have concrete evidence? Navarax shouted on the spot. Of course I do. The evidence is this. Morning wheat. Tyrande tossed a large bag into the distance. This. Such bright natural energy. There's no problem. Navarax sensed it. Tyrande laughed coldly. Of course there's no problem if you didn't use the Emerald Dream to send your soul into this bag of wheat. At this moment Fandral's expression finally changed. Nonsense. Is that so? Malfurion is in a deep sleep because he was ambushed by the King of Nightmares, Savis, in the Emerald Dream and is trapped in a nightmare cage. Tyrant held the bow in her left hand, extremely agitated. She was already beyond angry. Her impassioned voice suddenly rose an octave. Fandral, you ordered the druids to collect large amounts of morning wheat in order to create a cursed poison to sprinkle on Malfurion's sleeping body. If not for the Moon Goddess Temple's priests taking care of him, I'm afraid that even if Malfurion escaped from the King of Nightmares, he would not have a body to return to. At this moment Duque spoke. Of course, Fandral, you can say that there was a traitor among the druids who collected the morning wheat, and he was bribed by the King of Nightmares to add poison. But who is in the right and who is in the wrong? Just find an archdruid to sink into the Emerald Dream to find out. Not only do you check the morning wheat, but also carefully listen to Teldrassil's voice. Hearing Duque and Tyrant's words, the druids began to waver. They were right. As long as an archdruid sank his soul into the Emerald Dream, all the mysteries would be revealed. The three archdruids, Brawl, Navarax and Runetotem, looked at each other and made a decision on the spot. Brawl said, I'm better at fighting. I'll protect you. Navarax smiled bitterly, I failed once in the Howling Caves. I'll forget about it this time. I'll do it. The Minotaur druid Hamuel smiled bitterly.